For the welcome, for your notes and everything. And I would also like to welcome everyone here. This is the highlight of our year. This is kind of the event that we all work towards, the event where we celebrate our Peace Fellows, where we learn from them, where we hear from their so-called applied field experience and from how the kind of courses and the skills they've learned here help them deal with the real world. In some sense, the theory kind of practice link that we all want to do here. You also have plenty of opportunity during the day to hear from them informally, formally. So I want to be very short here. I don't want to take up much time. The time should go to our fellows. They are the center. So I'll be super short. I won't say much of substance. I have some notes that in your booklets, I sort of have a welcome on the first page where I talk a little bit about, that we recently had our 20th anniversary. So there'll be kind of a lot of comments there, and I will not repeat them here. What I would like to do in the few minutes I have is to acknowledge and thank a few people. I'd like to thank Morgan, of course, first, my predecessor as former Rotary director. And I'd like to thank a number of previous directors of the Rotary Centre. One has just walked in, Associate Professor Marion Hansen. She will be providing a keynote later, so I will introduce Marion in more detail later on. But a big thanks to Marion. Professor Richard Devitak will be here today. He was director for several years. I don't think he's here yet. And Dr. Melissa Curley, who's been directing for several years, she will send her apologies for today. Now, especially big thanks to all of you Rotarians here. As Morgan said, this is a partnership we hugely value. You make all this possible. You provide the opportunities for our fellows to engage in an absolutely unique learning experience, with the idea, of course, that the fellows we have here today, that they will be the future leaders of tomorrow. And we hope we provide them with some of the skills necessary to understand, address, and solve conflicts, so that by the time they are in power in 10, 20 years, they will create a better and more peaceful world for us. So I cannot acknowledge all of you wonderful Rotarians, but I will say, I will sort of give a special thanks to a few of them. Michelle Davis, who is here today as the acting host area coordinator, standing in for Leslie Smith. I have just learned yesterday that the host area coordinator is called a hack. So on this occasion, I'd like to actually also thank Ian, who has just walked out, our IT person on top. Thank you so much, Ian, for your work. And I want to say, Ian, you have nothing to fear from our hacks. So they'll be safe. Thanks to all host area councillors. Again, you provide an absolutely wonderful support to our fellows who come in, a very difficult task, a demanding task. We had a meeting yesterday, and we really, really appreciate the work you do. Big thanks to John Lawrence, who has been a supporter for as many years as I've been here, 25 or more years of our center. Massive thanks, John. He's on our advisory board. He is a past Rotary International director, and he's also part of a review of the program currently that Jacqueline and John are doing. So the kind of commitment you have for us, John, is absolutely wonderful. Big thanks. A big thanks and welcome to Tim and Gail Keeler AM. Again, your support is hugely appreciated, and we very much appreciated it. Welcome and thanks to Daryl Isepi, past district governor. I've seen him this morning. We had a chat. Hello, Daryl. Big thanks to Ross Kelly. Big thanks to Bob Fell. Big thanks to Sean Forbes, where is Sean? I had the chance to work with Sean for many, many years when she was the manager of the faculty. When I got here decades ago now at UQ. And again, thanks, Sean, for your wonderful support. He's also a past hack. So again, nothing to fear. Welcome, thanks to Nick Curry, another past hack. Thank you so much. Mark Anderson, big thanks for all your support, Mark. We really appreciate it. And there'll be a lot more. And again, I'd like to sort of say a collective thanks to all the wonderful Rotarians, the support you have. And I've had the privilege of working with the community for so many years. Then I add to Morgan's comments to say a very special welcome to our program officer from Rotary International in Chicago, Jacqueline Aspaitia. Big welcome, Jacqueline. Now, the job of Rotary Director comes with many, many wonderful aspects, but one of the big ones certainly is to work with Jacqueline. She is an absolutely wonderful person to work with. The job is pretty demanding. I think Jacqueline and I are almost daily in email contact and constant Zoom. So to have that kind of support from Chicago is absolutely phenomenal. And a big welcome to Queensland, Jacqueline. I'm afraid we have a sort of very horrible early winter day here, but I hope you still enjoy the day. So. Now, also, a very, very big thanks to everyone who has been involved in organizing this event today. As you know, organizing an event like this takes many, many months, much effort behind the scene to make sure everything works. So thanks first to the 3 fellows who have been part of the organizational committee. So that's Sarah, Tunde, and Nick. So big thanks to the 3 of you. I also want to say that Tunde and his wife Victoria just had their first baby a couple of days ago. So massive congratulations. Big thanks to Diana McCluskey, our center manager. She's the force behind everything. Like, this event wouldn't happen without Diana. She's organized many of these annual seminars before, and she does so much work behind the scene. Like your wonderful booklet that you have, this is all her kind of work. So the kind of work that goes in that she does is absolutely phenomenal. So big thanks, Diana. Big thanks to Sebastian Kempf, Dr. Sebastian Kempf, who has come on board as Deputy Director. He's primarily responsible for the applied field experience, for the International Day of Peace, and for helping our fellows with some of the academic work. And he's done a lot of work with our fellows, getting them ready for today, preparing the presentations, doing a dry run together with Diana yesterday. So absolutely big thanks, Seb, who's sitting at the very end up there, and you'll get to meet him during the day. Also thanks to Dr. Dan Druckmann, who is a very, very senior conflict resolution scholar who is here every year, and almost every year he's helped with the fellows who's preparing their presentations. Then big thanks to Emily Sievers, who is over here. Emily is our executive assistant. And she's sacrificing her entire weekend to be with us today and help. And, Emily is literally the Wonder Woman in our school who does everything and makes sure everything is working smoothly. Huge thanks. Now, last and not least, a big thanks to all of our Peace Fellows. You're amazing. You are our future. You are, the people who will create a better world for us. Thanks for your commitment to hard work, to learning, to challenging yourself. And in many ways, learning is a process of unlearning, of kind of challenging the kind of assumptions you have, of opening yourself up to new ways of seeing, new ways of doing things. And that is, by definition, a difficult task. And they're doing absolutely wonderful, thanks to your commitment to peace, to making a better world for us, to being our future. Now, this week has been exceptionally challenging for the fellows because they're in the middle of the semester. There's lots of assignments due. They all take 4 courses. They all deal with deadlines. They all work overtime. And in addition, this week was a lot of work for them to get ready for today, to practice their presentations, to organize all this is being set up. So this was a very, very, very demanding work for them. And I'm exceptionally grateful for them for having stepped up and doing all this absolutely wonderful, wonderful work. So look, welcome everyone. I hope you have a wonderful day. I'm going to step back. I'll let the fellows run things. And I want to hand over first to Tim Keeler, AM, and then to Michelle Davis to welcome us from the Rotary side of things.
That's Mish. Thank you, Roland, for that. Thank you, Roland, very much for that introduction. And I too would like to thank you all for the opportunity of saying a few words on behalf of Rotary International in particular here in this district. I acknowledge the Rotarians that are here today. I acknowledge their guests. I acknowledge also the school and centre staff, and also acknowledge, most importantly, the Peace Fellows. As a humanitarian organisation, Rotary is unique as the pursuit of peace is a cornerstone of our mission. We believe when people pursue peace in their communities, the ripple effect is far-reaching and can have a global effect. Rotary finds that by carrying out service projects, supporting peace fellowships and scholarships, and by working alongside governments and not-for-profits, Rotarians can address the underlying causes of conflict, poverty, discrimination, ethnic tension, inequality of educational access, and the unequal distribution of resources. Rotary's commitment to peace building today is stronger than ever, and we are addressing the difficult questions of how can we make the greatest impact? How can we achieve our vision of lasting change? We believe that we are approaching the concept of peace with inclusivity, greater cohesion, expanding our vision, and finding new ways for people to get involved. Paramount to our endeavours is the Rotary Peace Centres that have educated now, and please correct me if I'm wrong, over 1,400. Really, update your website. Because that's a critical point. To become effective catalysts for peace through their subsequent careers in education, government, international organisations, such as the United Nations and UNESCO. Locally, since its commencement in 2003, the University of Queensland have been an integral part of this worldwide program. As we host this year, the 20th class, I have no doubt that due to the expertise of the university staff, the pastoral care of our counsellors, the support of our entire Rotary family, this again will be a successful and memorable year. Thank you to all involved. And I would be wrong if I didn't encourage all of you to be involved with the upcoming Focus on Peace, an immersion program that is being held here on the 24th to 25th of May. It promises to be an informative, enjoyable, and will challenge each one of us. And if you'd like any further details, Mark Anderson, John Lawrence would be only too pleased to tell you more about it. Thank you.
Hello there. I'm down here. Everyone can see me? It was really funny when Diana said, could I send her a photo? I mean, you know, when you change your look, what do you do? Because I don't look like that anymore. Thank you for today. Just to let you know, I am the acting host area coordinator, or HAC, as we're referred to, for Leslie Smith, who is in South Africa for her mother's 91st birthday. Amazingly, she's still living independently at that age, which is fantastic. So welcome to the Rotary Peace Fellows Seminar for Class 19 and 20. And their theme is Fostering Peace, Leave No One Behind. And what an apt phrase for peace building. And this is what they're all about. Some of the Peace Fellows, as you heard, commenced during COVID, but they've risen above the challenges, which is amazing. And like many of us, they've experienced extraordinary times. Nonetheless, they've been able to put into practice their learnings with a variety of applied field experiences. And this seminar provides an excellent opportunity for them to share these today with the Rotarians and the Friends of Rotary who have supported them. We are fortunate to have the University of Queensland, which is with such a well-recognised Peace Centre, which offers amazing experiences for these graduate students. They also have the opportunity to explore and enjoy the beauty and excitement of this wonderful country, Australia. And I know quite a few of them have already been out there having a lot of fun. The investment in the Peace Fellow program is extensive and long-term. And when we look at our Peace Fellow alumni and what they are achieving, we can see the wide-ranging benefits and positive changes they are all making and will continue to make. So we reap the rewards for years, if not decades to come. As a counsellor, I stand in awe at what is being achieved by fellows who have graduated from the University of Queensland. An important facet of the program is the diversity of the fellows, which is refreshing and exciting. Over the years, Peace Fellows have demonstrated to us that the way to peace has many different routes. It comes in different forms and has different faces. I recently received an update on the 10 fellows from the cohort 17, which shows how diverse this and every group is. And they are all working in peace building and development. 3 currently work for the United Nations. Erica is working internationally with young people in emerging peace building, while also undertaking her PhD at QUT. She never ceases to amaze me. Mary is working in women's peace and security in the Philippines and one in economic development. Cora is working on supporting and empowering refugees and asylum seekers. Nico is working on big data for peace. My mind boggles at that one. And Jackie and Estefania are working on cultural understanding, self-empowerment, peace. Some are working with governments and not-for-profits, such as Alexis in Ghana, Huisin in Myanmar, and Peter in the US. Overall, the cohort is making changes and building peace in their own way. All alumni, including our current students, bring a variety of talent and experience which can only enhance and ensure an even greater success of this outstanding program. This is evidence of the legacy of the Rotary Peace Fellow program. And I'm constantly moved by the connection. That's what Rotary is all about. We unite in friendship to realise truthful, fair, goodwill, and beneficial outcomes in our community, locally and around the world. The commitment of Rotary International to establish further education in the form of peace centres around the world, and with the support of local Rotary clubs and our host counsellors who are represented here today, we can make this a reality. For Rotary members and Peace Fellows, our lives will be forever transformed by this powerful network called Rotary International. It is an honour to be sharing the stage with the current Peace Fellows as they continue their journey, exploring the ways to make positive changes in the world and help to make peace a reality. So welcome.
Good morning, everybody. Greetings to all attendees and welcome to the 20th Rotary Peace Seminar. On behalf of 19th and 20th Rotary Peace Fellows, extend to all of you our sincere appreciation to the Rotary Foundation. Rotary has granted us the opportunity to pursue our Master's in Peace and Conflict Studies here at the University of Queensland. Through this fellowship, we were able to deepen our knowledge and experiences in practicing peace, engage in an applied field experience, or AFE, and connect with a global network of Rotarians who supported us throughout our journeys in and beyond Australia. We embarked on our field experiences from November 22 to February 2023, spreading across the globe from Europe to the Middle East, Asia, Africa, North America, and here in Oceania. We worked with various organizations ranging from nonprofits, think tanks, international, and we focused on issues such as climate change adaptation, refugees and forced migration, human rights, and vulnerable groups protection, offering our expertise, expanding our skills, and learning from peers and locals in the field. We returned to Brisbane with more grounding in our learnings. For many of us, the field experience was a time of expansion, broadening our capacity to see and imagine how peace happens, is understood, and can emerge. Peace is a continuous and active process that must involve everyone. Our society needs to be built in a way that leaves no one behind, ensures that everyone has equal access to opportunities and resources, regardless of their race, gender, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, or other social status. For this year's Peace Center, our cohorts have chosen the theme, Fostering Peace, Leave No One Behind. We hope to explore how we can work together to create an inclusive and equitable world where everyone's needs and aspirations are met and no one's left behind. We are excited to share our insights and learnings and experiences with you and hope that this seminar will be a productive and meaningful day for everyone. Today, we will hear from Class 20 about their field experiences. Then we'll pop out for a tea break where you can enjoy looking at a map of where us fellows have all worked. Come back and hear our fabulous keynote speaker, then break again for lunch in the Women's College. Afterwards, we'll return and divide into breakout rooms facilitated by us, the fellows, where you all will participate in some peace education activities and have the chance to ask fellows questions about their field experiences and presentations. In fact, for the in-person attendees, you'll see in your welcome bags that you should have a pad of paper and a pen. So if you think of any questions during the presentations, we unfortunately don't have any particular Q&A time. But if you have a question and you think good about it, be sure to jot it down and you'll have the chance to talk to the fellows during the breakout rooms. After these breakout rooms, we'll come back, have one final tea break, and end the day with Class 19's presentations and some final awards and wrap up. For those joining online, thank you so much for being here. And please drop a comment in the Zoom chat if you're having any accessibility issues. We've got Ian, our IT specialist, there to help you out. A special thanks to any virtual participants who have joined us from other time zones who may have stayed up late or woken up early to be here today. For those in person, feel free, if you've got any accessibility or mobility needs, to stand up. We've got, some little nooks in the corner here if you need to stretch your legs at all. We've got a bathroom right around the corner. Even if someone's in the middle of presenting, feel free to go to the bathroom. This is our space. We want everyone to feel comfortable. And for the fellows, I hope today goes great. I know we've all practiced our presentations. And if you flub up a little bit, that's okay. We're all here on each other's sides. So thank you so much, everyone, for being our partners today in this journey towards building a more inclusive and peaceful world, and enjoy the seminar.
Hello, everyone.
No, it's okay. Yeah, that might be helpful.
Hello, everyone. I'm Isadora. I'm from Brazil. It's such a pleasure to be here with all of you today. Thank you for making time in your Saturday. And I want to talk a little bit about my experience as a Rotary Peace Fellow in my internship. And especially, I want to bring your attention to the option of rethinking how we do humanitarian aid. My AFE had a lot to do with trauma work, and that definitely got me thinking. So I'll propose a little bit of that as I explain my journey to you. in the peace world. Oh. There we go. So I'm waiting. There we go. When we think about conflict and when we think about how conflict came to be, that was always something very puzzling for me. I studied international relations, and I want to understand how come people start conflicts, start wars, and why. So I put up in the top of the tree war, and then we have abuse, violence, conflict, and that was kind of like my path from international relations into moving into mediation, because I wanted to talk to people and understand what led them to that specific situation. And I think the main issue there is communication. But as I deepened my studies and I studied some psychology, I understood that sometimes people don't really know what their needs are. And that's a big issue when we are trying to negotiate and we are trying to bring peace. Digging deeper, I realized that actually trauma, so sort of in comparison to that other tree of how conflict came to be, this is sort of my path throughout my studies, from international relations to restorative justice, mediation, psychology, and somatic experiencing, which is where I did my AFE. So this is me in a Congress in Bali when I was working with Mediators Beyond Borders. And it was an amazing experience because I got to see people from different places and how they were leaders and really just helping their own communities. Because very often when we talk about peace, we think it has to be something international and something really broad and maybe even abstract. But I actually realized each one of those speakers there were just like me. And they just realized, well, I can do this much. I can do this piece locally. So I moved to the Amazon border of Brazil, and I worked with refugees there. So I used my skills in mediation to try to create a safe space for people to communicate and relate. And my idea was mainly to empower the women who are there so that they can be included and don't feel so isolated in their new communities in Brazil. But when I sat down with them and I allowed them to have that space to connect and talk, my main idea is to give them specific tools so that they would be able to, as soon as I allowed them to just be there, I realized they were not over everything that had happened to them. They really needed to talk about what had happened, and they needed to process those feelings, and they were not ready to enter a new community because they were still living in that trauma. They were still stuck in what had happened to them. It's coming? Okay. It's a coffee break. Should I wait? Okay. Well, soon you will see a different image. No? Okay. Well, in my journey working with the women in the shelter, I found out that I needed more training and I needed to understand better how could I assist those people. So I came to the University of Queensland and I applied to this program because of Morgan, because I wanted to understand more about mediation, about Indigenous practices, and especially how can we include people who are from different places and who have been through all of those issues. Yes, there you go. So Peter Levine is the doctor who made the term somatic experiencing, and that's a technique that is used to help people work through their traumatic experiences and hopefully live a better and healthier life. Because trauma is so misunderstood. Very often people don't see the signs, that don't really know how to deal with that. So leading causes of trauma is obviously war, natural disasters, and very adverse childhood experiences, but we never think about chronic stress, which is a main cause. And we all go through that sometimes, especially in the humanitarian field. So peace workers very often suffer from burnout. For example, in the place where I was working, we only had contracts for 3 months because people couldn't usually sustain that work for much longer. And what happens is that when you're traumatized, you're usually in that yellow and red zone. So it means you're not fully aware of your choices and you're making decisions out of fear. That's what makes people either more violent or more scared. So we want people to be able to be in the green zone so that they are not as violent and they're not making decisions based on the fear that they have of something that don't understand, of different people. So like I said, trauma responses, you sometimes freeze and sometimes you feel like you're in danger, even if you're not. So we want to bring people to a safe space, social engagement, when you meet with friends, when you're relaxed, for example. And what happens is that people who are deeply traumatized, they keep only on those 2 stages and they're not able to move from that. So I went to Germany because they have one of the biggest somatic experiences center there. And I was able to be in person, but I was working with a virtual team. And we were working especially to translate all this material that they have that we call the emotional first aid kit. And I was in the task force for the Ukraine. It was called the Ukrainian task force. And our team was composed. So this is the material. It's coming. So yes, that's me. And we had the European and the international co-chairs. And my supervisor, Melissa Sinclair, who is the crisis response coordinator, she used to work for USAID, and she came from the humanitarian field to the trauma field work. And sort of in that same, we really align in that idea that when we work through what people really need and we give them the possibility to have a better life and to feel calm and to make better decisions, then we are fostering peace instead of from interventions that sometimes are top-bottom, but long-term don't create sustainable peace. So a brief overview of the work we've done in the Ukrainian task force. We had resources, we had webinars, and we had what we call Resilience Connection, which was really an opportunity for Ukrainians to connect and to rebuild that community that they had lost because of the war. So some people were still in Ukraine, others were in Poland, Hungary, Germany, but they were all able to talk about and process what had happened to them, which led to a better opportunity of their integration in new places or just feeling calmer and more stable in if they were in country still. We also had some wonderful volunteers who did one-on-one sessions. And we translated a lot of material with our amazing volunteers from across the globe. We translated to different languages, and it was over 71,000 words. We translated Scope, which is that material that I'm going to have displayed on my table if you all want to see it later, which is just basic steps for you to calm down your nervous system, and other, especially picture books and other things that kids would use to process their trauma, because it's different and you can't just tell them to feel calm, or sometimes they cannot understand the full complexity of what's happening to them. So in the end, we did a conference. That was my main project there, to really gather the knowledge of 1 year of the task force and understand the best practices and exchange, what we could learn from the people on the ground and the work that they were doing. Finally, I want to leave you all with a reflection of why this is so important. When we're talking about peace, we have to understand that everything we do and the way that we act, that affects people. And when we are more peaceful within ourselves, we're able to create a more sustainable peace within the global system. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and for spending your Saturday with us, learning about our internships this year. My name is Jenny Eck, and I am a Rotary Peace Fellow from the class of 20. I come from Helena, Montana, in the Rocky Mountain West of the United States. As you can see in that picture, we're up near the Canadian border. The Capitol building, Helena's the capital of Montana, that's in the foreground. I just spoke with a friend this morning and he said he still has 4 inches of snow in his yard on April 22nd. So I was much appreciating my walk through campus today with my short sleeves, extra much. My background is in politics and government generally. I spent 6 years as an elected official in Montana. I was in the state legislature in the House of Representatives. I spent 2 of those years as the minority leader. And my focus was really on issues surrounding women's empowerment and violence affecting particularly women, not always, but gender-based violence. I carried a lot of bills around sexual assault, domestic violence, judicial transparency, and consumer protection. And after 6 years in the minority, I decided I needed to get out and do something a little more direct. So I went on to run a shelter for those impacted by domestic and sexual violence in Helena. But I'd always carried a secret little dream that someday I would get to do international work around women's empowerment. I didn't think it was possible. I had my kids right out of college, and it just seemed like it wasn't really going to be in the cards for me. And when I found out about this scholarship and applied for it, I had this hope that maybe it would work out. And the fact that it did has been really an amazing opportunity. So thank you for your support for this program. One of the great things about this program is the opportunity to do an internship, to apply for an internship somewhere in the world. And for me, I really wanted to do an internship involving women and the opportunity to work with women and learn from women in community. I didn't want to be behind a computer in a big city. I really wanted to be out in the field, as it's sometimes referred to. I was lucky to find this internship with Mission East, which is a INGO, an international organization that does also, they work in 11 countries, including in Nepal. They work in one of the most remote parts of Nepal, this area called Karnali region. If you're familiar, it's in the foothills of the Himalayas. And I got to travel to this area to give you a sense of how remote it is. It took 48 hours of travel by domestic flight, prop plane, Jeep, and 6 hours of trekking to get to the first village. And from there, we trekked on to other villages as we did site visits across the region. One of the things we learn a lot about at the University of Queensland in this program is the importance of focusing on the local, especially when we're doing development projects, really focusing on what does it mean to come in to a community and learn from people who live there and hear from them what their needs are. And I like that about Mission East. They prioritize the local. All of their staff are Nepali, including their country director. And the main project that they focus on is working with women's farmers cooperatives in this rural, very remote region. And so I had the opportunity to do site visits. I had conversations with over 36 women one-on-one and learned about their lives. Most of them were beneficiaries of the projects and some of them were not. So I also had the opportunity to compare between people who had been receiving these benefits of the projects and those who had not. And what's really great about the projects that I learned about is that it's really education focused. So Mission East comes in and they have staff that live in the area and they meet with these women cooperative groups. There's 24 women to a group in a village and there's cooperatives across the region. And by becoming a part of the cooperative, women also then are taught about how to save money and how to, they have access to a cooperative bank, essentially, that is also run by members of the women's cooperatives. So they save money every month, and that gives them the opportunity to then, if they need microloans, take those microloans later on. The biggest challenge in this region is honestly climate change. There's been massive impacts to agriculture in this area. There have been long dry spells followed by very intense monsoons. So they've seen mudslides. Before I came, there was a mudslide that wiped out 6 villages in the region. So it's a significant challenge, and it's really changing the way that crops are grown and how long, the different kinds of crops that can survive. So they also do a lot around climate adapt. They do. They do a lot around climate adaptive agricultural practices, crop diversification, teaching about animal husbandry, and also hygiene and sanitation. So in a lot of these villages, there's maybe one water tap that everyone shares. So they work really hard about, bringing in supplies like soap and sanitary pads and learning about hygiene. They also help women start to think about how they want to maybe start small businesses with the money that they're earning, the excess money, reinvesting that money. So they do a lot of that work. And then really what it's doing, though, is helping these women be empowered to then go on and invest in themselves and in their families. So it was an incredible opportunity. I'm giving you just a smidge of what this experience was like. I can't tell you how amazing it was to just have the opportunity to sit on one of those rooftops. These houses all have these rooftops where they dry their grains or dry their chilies and have these conversations and learn about women's lives. I have thought a lot about how we do development and how we respond to crisis. And one of the takeaways that I had from being in this region is that climate change is something that is just going to keep being a significant game changer in these areas, and we're going to have to continually be adapting. The government, for example, is planning to put a road through this region, the first time ever that there would be a road going through this area. But every year, the monsoons have been washing that road out. And so it'll be interesting to see whether that road can be completed. And if it is completed, how is that going to impact the people who live in that area? They have mixed feelings about it, understandably. On the one hand, it'll create greater access to markets. On the other, it may bring some really unwanted changes, and there's concern about, sexual exploitation and other issues potentially. What is localization, and what do we really mean by that is another question that I came away with. It is important to focus on the local, but I would also say that I think even the way that these operations are happening is still hierarchical, in the sense that this is an INGO that's based in Europe. Yes, the staff are Nepali, but in order to do their work, they have to have master's degrees in Western agriculture and in Western entrepreneurship. And so those are the skills that they're teaching. And sometimes it might be helpful or worth thinking about, is there something to be learned the other direction? Women's empowerment education, do we have all the answers from the West? And I think the obvious answer, of course, is no, we don't. Climate change is new. We're all figuring it out. We're all adapting. But these women and their families have lived in this region for generations upon generations. And they are also experts in their own resilience and in their own livelihoods. And many of the women I talk to actually have these amazing skills. For example, many of them will go into the forest and they'll forage for herbal medicines, and they will use those medicines for their families, and they will take them and sell them at market to make extra money. What could we learn from them about that? And ultimately, I think the biggest takeaway for me was the importance of humility and curiosity, because we're all facing unprecedented challenges as humans. And we have so much to learn from one another, about community, so much to learn from one another about how we're going to continue to adapt to all these changes that we're facing. And so I think if we can face that with humility and listening to one another, and also curiosity about what's possible, that there's a lot of hope in those two pieces of wisdom. Thank you so much.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nick Miller, and I just want to say thanks to Jenny and Isa for making it so much harder for me to go next because they're so great. But thank you so much for coming today to listen to us. And let me click through the next one. Okay, so I get to talk to you today about one of my greatest passions. And anybody that knows me knows that I eat, sleep, breathe Mongolia. And I'd like to explain a little bit why. So long story short, I was in the United States Marine Corps for 7 years. I was stationed in Japan. And while I was living in Japan, I realized that this is probably going to be the only time I have to get to go to this country. And so I traveled to Mongolia and I lived with a nomadic family for a little more than a week. And it was an incredible experience. It challenged everything that I understood about myself and everything I understood growing up in the United States. And so when I got back to Japan, I started volunteering at a Japanese orphanage in my free time. And I realized that I really enjoyed doing more community service work, more than I enjoyed the bureaucracy and the security of the Marine Corps. So I had an incredible boss who recommended that I look at applying for the Rotary Peace Fellowship. When I did, similar to Isa, I saw Morgan Briggs' class on Indigenous politics. And to me, I really want to understand the term Indigenous and when can it be applied, when can it not be applied, and could it be used in the term of nomadic populations? Obviously, Mongolia has a very large nomadic population in comparison to other Eurasian countries. But I saw that this was an opportunity for me to go and to learn about something I'm just really intrigued by. So for most people, a lot of folks don't know where Mongolia is. It's a landlocked country stuck between Russia and China. It is a democracy. And so it's a very interesting foreign political it's interesting looking at their foreign policy, but also looking at the anatomy of their population, about the anthropology of it as well. So for my applied field experience, I got to go back to Mongolia. I've been there 3 times now. This is the first and the last time I will ever go back in winter. It was minus 45 degrees. It was terrible. Coming back to Brisbane and the heat of summer was such a shock. But I got the opportunity to work with the International Institute for the Study of Nomadic Civilization. It works underneath the auspice of UNESCO. And basically what that organization is, it's trans-regional. So it includes Turkey, Kazakhstan, the Kyrgyz Republic, where I lived before, and then Mongolia, of course, which they chair and they head this, and then also Indonesia, because they have maritime-born nomads. And so they were not at our meeting, but in this picture, you get to see the staff, mostly Mongolian, myself as the only English native speaker, and then representatives from Turkey, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and obviously Mongolia. So it was a great opportunity for me to jump in because they had their 5th, basically their meeting since they started in the late 1990s. In the late 1990s, after communism collapsed in the Soviet Union and the Mongolian People's Republic, the late 1990s, they decided, let's get together and let's understand globally what nomadic populations are struggling with, whether it's climate change, whether it's avoidance or basically negative relations with the state and taxation. And I really wanted to understand what that intersection looked like. So I had the opportunity to study and to learn from them. Outside of the capital of Ulaanbaatar, I also had the opportunity to travel to the northernmost part of Mongolia, where the Tuvan reindeer herders still live and still operate. So they speak a different dialect. They have basically a national park dedicated to them. But this is just one type of nomadic population in Mongolia. There's the Kazakh Mongolians who use eagles and hawks and falcons for hunting. There's the Buryat Mongols and the ethnic Mongols that are in the north and east. And actually, a lot of them live in Russia now and have been employed by the Russian military to fight in Ukraine. And so there's a lot of ethnic tensions between Buryat Mongols and the Russian state. And also, what does that mean for Buryat Mongols crossing the border into Mongolia as well? So there's a lot going on with these nomadic populations, that it's not only about their way of life, but the ethnicities that are wrapped up in this and state policy towards that. So anyway, getting back to it, I got out of the capital city and similar to Jenny making a 48-hour trek, it was a long trek. There was only one paved road going north in Mongolia and cut across west. After we drove on that for an entire day, We basically had to spend another day driving on unpaved roads and on frozen rivers, which was very exciting. And then we took a horseback ride, about 6 hours to one family. Unfortunately, I got very sick there. As you can imagine, -45, -50 degrees. There's not really any hospitals around. And so the next step would have been another 12-hour horse trek to get to the reindeer herders themselves. And so we decided at that point it'd probably just be smarter and wiser for me to make my way back to the Rotary Peace Fellowship program rather than freeze to death out there. And so we ended up coming back, but it is extremely far and arduous. Most tourists don't go there in wintertime. And so when we called to let them know ahead of time that, you know, I'm a researcher and or tourist going out there, they were all very shocked that somebody wanted to try this. But so we got out there, realized the hospitals weren't close enough. It would have been about 18 hours by horse just to get to a doctor. And so came back. But anyway, you get to see, this is one of the only groups of people that still practice reindeer nomadism. There might be some up in Norway and Scandinavia, but really they embody this, and they've been doing this for hundreds of years. And so this is the old Russian van that we get to travel in. Thankfully, it has a heater, and so we used it really well. But came back to UB, to Ulaanbaatar, and got to do some research and got to work with the director and do some studying under whether or not the term indigenous should apply. And that's really why I wanted to come to UQ, because in Australia, you are confronted with the term indigenous daily. And you are, hopefully anyway, learning how to, you know, go back and integrate and figure out the best way forward for being inclusive and keeping all people involved in this program. And keeping everybody involved in society and civilization as we progress forward. This is something that I really wanted to learn from Australia and possibly take and apply and look at whether or not it can be used in Mongolia. Because if it can be used in Mongolia with their nomadic population, which I would consider is probably the largest in the world, what does that mean for Kazakhstan? What does it mean for Turkey, for Kyrgyzstan, and for Indonesia? So if you use Mongolia as the flagship, it basically affects all of the other countries as well. And so, as you can see, Game of Thrones type weather. I'm not one for cultural appropriation, but I did get the chance, the wise chance to wear the traditional clothing. It's called a deal, what they use in wintertime where you don't freeze. And so that's made from sheepskin and sheep wool. And they let me borrow that while I was there. And then it is the most underpopulated country in the world. As of 2018, I haven't seen the newest report, but as of 2018, for every one person, there's 22 animals or livestock anyway. So it is very secluded, very remote. And I do recommend everybody travel there. Just do it in their summer. I highly recommend that. So that's all for me. But if you have any questions, obviously, I'm happy to talk with you at the breakout session. So thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for dedicating your time to be here today. My name is Rebwan Mohammed. I am from Kurdistan region of Iraq. My name is Rebwan Mohammed. I am from Kurdistan region of Iraq, where in 1998, I graduated as a geography teacher in the Institute of Teaching. So I'm a qualified geography teacher, but I had no chance to teach because of the political situation back then. Then in 1999, I migrated to the United Kingdom, where I stayed and achieved my BA in International Relations at the University of Westminster. In 2013, I decided to return back into my country. So my return coincided with the mass influx of Syrian refugees to my country and to the region as a whole. So I had a chance, unfortunately, to work with refugees because they were displaced. So I started working with an international NGO to provide assistance to the Syrian refugees. So I worked with the organization for 2 years. And then in January 2016, I joined the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, providing assistance to the Syrian refugees, refugees from Iran, refugees from Turkey, and internal displaced IDPs where they left the area of origin when ISIS invaded large swaths of lands in Iraq in 2014 and afterwards. So the picture in the top is serving the Syrian refugees in winter 2021, providing winter cash assistance. The people that I am serving are those who had difficulties to receive the assistance, but we managed to solve the problem out and receive the assistance in later stages. The bottom picture in the greenhouse is working with Iranian refugees who have been displaced for many, many years, refugees in our region. So UN funded some 20 greenhouses for 20 families who can make a living for their families. The bottom picture is working with IDPs from central governorates of Iraq, displaced in 2014, living in formal camps. Although ISIS is defeated like 5 years ago in 2017, but there are many, many people who live still in displacement. In my city, we have over 100,000 IDPs still live in the camps and in urban locations. So my journey with Rotary Peace, I would like to be honest with you. It was during COVID when I was working online at home and everyone was online working. My wife was working for a different UN agency. So she said, why don't you apply for this fellowship? So I was focusing on my work and I never had attention to pursue my studies further. So she said, why don't you apply for this? I said, okay, send me the link. She sent the link after a long process. When I read the information in the website, I say, okay, this is very, very fit for me. I have all the qualification and I meet all the conditions in the website. So I applied. After a long process, I received an email congratulating me for being accepted. So when I went home, I told my wife, I said, I am accepted for the fellowship. And she was devastated. She didn't like the idea at all. Okay. Okay, I say, okay, I was focusing on my study. I didn't have any plan to study abroad, but you encouraged me. You recommended the course for me. Now I am accepted. Why you are not happy? But I don't blame her. We have 2 children. She has to look after the children. And I'm very, very much like thankful for her support. If she wasn't her support, I would have been able to be here today. So she's, thank you. Thank you. So she's looking after my children. And when I look back at how far have we come? So I am already like more than halfway through, and I am sure that I will successfully, with all your support, of course, will finish and get back to work. So I am expected to be back at work in November, in the worst case scenario in December. Thank you. And my AFE, it took place in Jordan. I was based in the capital Amman, working with Syrian refugees. And the picture shows how the shelter looks like for the Syrian refugees after more than 11 years of displacement. It was devastating. It's very, very difficult. And when I was like seeing this situation, when I was going to any particular tent, I was like I was pity. I could see how difficult it is, and I imagine that there is nothing from my side that my children are not in the same situation. Yeah, I work with wonderful people from an Italian NGO, Terra des Homes. These are the wonderful people who made my stay very, very comfortable there. What was interesting in this applied field experience, the diversity of the team. So we had people from Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine, and Italy, including me as well. Okay, humanitarian context in Syria. So when the crisis began, Syrians began to get out of the country. Majority of them are placed in Turkey now, where they have around 3 million people. Lebanon comes as second, a tiny country. They have over 1.3 million Syrian refugees. We have Jordan comes in the 3rd place, where there are just under 700,000 Syrian refugees. And then my country, Iraq, where there are 250,000 Syrian refugees. Majority of the Syrian refugees in my town, in my country where I work with them, they are based in the northern governorate. So the city I was working for the UN, so we had around 40,000 Syrian refugees. Out of that, 1 out of 10 person lives in a formal camp. Majority of them live in the urban locations. The top picture shows again how the shelter for Syrian refugees look like in Jordan. The bottom one is a formal camp, one of the biggest camps in Jordan, Zaatari. The problem for the Syrian refugee, when they live in urban locations, in remote locations like the picture above, they live close to the greenhouses where majority of them work in the agriculture sector. But unfortunately, there is no education for the children. There are no wash facilities for every family. So many families, 5, 10 families, share one bathroom. So it was devastating. This is the team I was working with, partner in the organization to those homes, a team of a gynecologist, a medical staff, a pediatrician, 2 nurses and a driver, and 1 staff from the NGO. As a picture shows that I was working with refugees, Syrians, where the medical team went to different locations. Sometimes we were sent to going to the same location. So I was conducting a post-satisfaction survey to find out how satisfied they were with the services provided by the NGO. And the picture in the back showed the pediatrician providing postnatal care to a newborn baby and a mom. This is the greenhouses where many of the Syrian refugees live close by. They work in the greenhouse and they make a living for their families. And these are the farmers who are working in the greenhouses. Syrian refugees have a very good talent and they are creative in terms of agriculture. So they bring about many businesses and agricultural products that were not existed before, especially in my country. When they come, we have some type of product that was not existed before the Syrian arrived. So the key points here I would like to make, I have worked with Syrian refugees and Iraqi IDPs for many years, or more than 10 years. What I am gaining from in my journey with the Rotary and the information and knowledge I gain at the UQ will enable me to efficiently serve the refugees in the longer term. Okay, and the final one, refugees are not the burden wherever they go. Wherever they go, they bring something with them. And that thing with them, they serve the community and the country as a whole. That is one example. So a bundle of belonging isn't the only thing a refugee brings to his or her new country. Albert Einstein was once a refugee. So that's all from my side. Thank you very much. If you have any question, we can meet in the. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good morning, noble Rotarians, invited guests of honors, and observers in our midst, of course. I also want to say I pay my respect and homage to the traditional owners of the land on which I currently stand. My homage and respect goes to their elders past, present, and emerging. My name is Tunde Ogunyale. I'm from Nigeria. And I'm the newest that Roland mentioned earlier. I have my background in law and mediation in Nigeria, and I'm also the founder and executive director of Peace-Based Initiative for Peace Advocacy in Nigeria. Peace-Based Initiative is a youth-led, non-governmental organization that promotes peace and peaceful coexistence across these 6 geopolitical zones that we have in Nigeria. I, like the rest of my colleagues from Class 20, commenced my Rotary Peace Fellowship experience July last year, and I can tell you that it has been an incredible and awesome experience for me. I had my applied field experience at the global headquarters of the Institute for Economics and Peace, IEP, in Sydney between November last year and February this year. So for convenience, I've decided to talk about my applied field experience in 3 blocks: peace education, partnerships, and reports. on peace education. As a peace builder and as a peace scholar, I have learned so far that there are two major conceptualizations of peace: negative peace and positive peace. Negative peace is the most popular, is the absence of war or the absence of fear of war. Meanwhile, peace is actually much more than that. And that is why positive peace is actually very, very important. What is positive peace? Positive peace speaks about the institutions, the structures that when they are properly put in place, we foster more peaceful coexistence in every community, in every society. So I was privileged to be at the Institute for Economics and Peace for 3 months. And IEP, as some of you may know, is a global think tank that aims to create a paradigm shift in the way that the world thinks about peace. So one of the major things that IEP really focuses on is positive peace framework. So I had the opportunity of attending several workshops and learning more deeply about positive peace, what positive peace really entails. IEP uses 8 pillars to categorize peace. Like there are 8 pillars of positive peace, including but not limited to well-functioning government, equitable distribution of resources, high level of human capital, low levels of corruption, acceptance of the right of others, and many more others. You will get to know them later on in this seminar. So one of the projects I had the opportunity to work with the IEP team on is the IEP Savannah Pride Workshop, so which they had in Blacktown, Sydney, during my stay there at the IEP. This particular project focused on strengthening the resilience and social cohesion of the people in Blacktown, particularly the South Sudanese community in Blacktown. So the one in the middle speaks about the IEP Ambassadors Project, which I also worked on. I also had the opportunity to take the IEP Peace Academy workshop and the IEP Ambassadors Program. I participated in the program myself, and I had the opportunity of reviewing 64 projects that were implemented by the IEP ambassadors globally. And the one speaks about the workshop I actually carried out as a person, having gone through what positive peace really means, having attended several workshops and having learned a lot on what positive peace really means. I really wanted to do something urgently for my community back at home. And so during my AFP in Sydney, I set up this virtual positive peace workshop for some select number of young Nigerian leaders working across different sectors in Nigeria. I had the opportunity to do that. It was my 3 a.m. It was their 5 p.m. in Nigeria, but then the opportunity I'm having as a Rotary Peace Fellow gives me the encouragement to also do at least that for them at home. So this is one of the things I've been able to do, and I have the opportunity, I have the plan to continue to do this moving forward. Partnerships. Some of you Rotarians will definitely know that currently IEP and Rotary International are in a very strategic relationship. So they are working together to ensure that our positive peace is activated globally. And so during my stay in Sydney with the IEP, I had the opportunity of working on different partnerships, assignments or engagements that the IEP had at the time. One of them is the fact that I was able to gather about 250 Rotary Peace Builders Clubs contacts for the IEP for their future projects. And also, IEP was planning to go to Nigeria together with Rotary International. West Africa, they wanted to organize a positive peace activators program in Nigeria as the venue, but then they invited participants across West Africa, across West African countries, and Nigeria was the venue. While I was there, I was able to review 60 applications from different applications that they received. It was an amazing experience for me. So the last one is the catalog that I was able to put in place for the IEP, because they are making an attempt to extend their partnership and to further promote peace, and they are going to different institutions across the world just to ensure that they have different strategic relationships, just like they are having with Rotary International currently. So when I was with them, I was able to put their different materials together into catalog so that we have easy presentation while speaking with their potential partners. And the last one, the last but not the least, is the fact that I had the opportunity to author and co-author different report projects. One of them is the IEP New South Wales government-sponsored Stronger Together project. So it was an amazing experience for me because it gave me the opportunity to improve my report writing skill. As a young leader leading my own organization in Nigeria, we've been having the opportunity to write reports, and I know that I will have more opportunity in the future to write different reports. So it's very, very important for me to improve my report writing skill. So the one in the middle is the report I authored for the IEP about their engagement in the Philippines. So, and the last one, which I also want to talk about, though not a report, is a talk. I want to mention that when I was in Sydney, I was not only, when I was not in the IEP, I had the opportunity to attend different Rotary clubs meeting. One of them is the Rotary Club of Sydney, as well as Rotary Club of Lincoln. On invitation, I had the opportunity to speak there. And before I left, I was invited by District 9685 by past district governor there, Lindsay May, to just speak to the incredible Rotaractors that were attending this Rotary district. So I had the opportunity of sharing with them what I do in Nigeria, leading my organization, and a brief of what I've been able to achieve and do, and what I'm still doing so far on my Rotary Peace Fellowship experience. So it was a nice time as well. My AFE outcomes generally, it gave me the exposure into positive peace framework. Before my Rotary Peace Fellowship, I had no idea on the different conceptualizations of peace. I just do what I do as a person because I have passion for peace building. So I had the opportunity to be exposed to what positive peace really means, and I was empowered to be a positive peace activator, and I had the privilege to also lead and organize or facilitate a positive peace workshop for my people at home. Moving forward, I really want to continue to inspire hope through peace building and through conflict resolution, particularly mediation. And this is one of the reasons why I actually applied for this Rotary Peace Fellowship, because I really want to be empowered as a mediator. I want to learn more. And moving forward, I want to continue to serve in this area. So if you have any question for me, please feel free to walk to me and speak to me during the breakout room session. Thank you very much for listening.
All right, you have almost made it to bathroom and coffee break. Just me. Hi, I am Sarah. I'm also from class 20. Thank you all for being here this morning and the whole day with us. So I'm from the United States, and I actually did not really get into the peace and conflict field until after my undergraduate. I moved to South Korea. I tried to highlight the countries on here, where I learned, surprisingly, that the Korean War over 70 years ago is actually still not resolved, and how people in South Korea are just living with that in their daily lives is an ongoing struggle for them to find lasting peace. Also, because I love to take the easy road, I asked Professor Briggs this semester if I could try to solve the Korean conflict in his class. I understand why 7 years later it is still not solved. After Korea, I decided I really wanted to focus on international security issues such as war, transnational war. So I went back to the United States and I got my master's degree from Northeastern University in international relations. During that time, I did an internship with the US Embassy in Switzerland and had the chance to observe how some of these large international organizations like the UN and others have a lot of power, but also a lot of restrictions for what they can do to solve transnational risks. After I graduated, I went into the foreign affairs field and began running some USAID programs throughout Maldives, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and Nepal. It was there that I kind of started narrowing down my interests. I found out, fun fact, that the Maldives, everybody thinks of this beautiful honeymoon location, is actually per capita the largest number of foreign terrorist fighters for ISIS. And so that really got me wondering of why, why do people travel across their borders to become involved in terrorism, violent extremism? And I decided, to the horror of my husband, I needed to go back to school again to get some more specialized experience. He's very thankful that I ran across the Rotary Peace Fellowship, which would allow us to not have another graduate school loan. And that brought me to Australia, where I have really gotten to dive in through, for example, Seb's class on different large international security issues and the challenges of addressing those. So for my AFE, I wanted to continue in this realm. I really wanted to understand more about why arguably the most powerful organizations in the world, like the United Nations, can't solve these conflicts that are preventing peace in everyday people's lives. So I went to the United Nations Office of Counterterrorism in New York City. This office is one of the newer ones at the UN, kind of with the rise of ISIS, the rise of violent extremism. They're really looking at how people are affected by terrorism. So the victims of terrorism, how terrorists are abusing cybersecurity, how they are getting weapons, how are they moving across borders. The biggest challenge that I learned on day one is that there is no universal agreement for what terrorism means. So every country can define something as terrorism for their own political means, perhaps. So it really is a challenge to try to address this situation in different countries. During my time at UNOCT, I got to join some Security Council meetings and really hear about, okay, this is a problem. Why aren't we addressing it? And there's not agreement. So picture, if you will, Russia and the United States trying to agree on anything right now. And that is a big problem. Outside of these meetings, I got to focus on 3 key activities in my time. I will take you briefly through each of them. First, I got to help draft the Global Counterterrorism Strategy, which is reviewed and revised every 2 years since it was adopted in 2006. This strategy focused on 4 pillars. What are the conditions that is spreading terrorism? How are countries preventing and combating terrorism within their borders? How do we build the capacity for states to better fight terrorism, all while ensuring that you're not impeding on people's human rights? So I got to join some roundtables with civil society, with regional organizations, and with heads of member states to hear about what terrorism looks like in their country, the challenges that they're facing to combat that terrorism, and then also the importance of ensuring that whatever strategy the UN helps support in that country is not impeding on human rights. The second thing that I got to work on was the drafting of Secretary General's call for the new agenda for peace. I thought this was very appropriate. As you can see, he came out several months ago and said he hopes that a new agenda for peace will include a process of deep reflection on what peace means in today's world and how we can most effectively work together to achieve it, leaving no one behind. Very right. I was pretty happy that he said that. So we heard a lot of the same things, actually. I held some roundtables, a lot with civil society, a lot with regional organizations. We heard the issues of terrorists and violent extremists abusing technology, the challenges of trying to address this within the community that looks at it from a community perspective. One of the biggest issues are these counterterrorism measures that are so broad that they can be used universally, but they don't actually target the real issue within each community. So it's a challenge, but it's also fascinating to try to design a very personalized strategy for each community that is built upon the strengths of those people. And the last activity I worked on was to help organize and run a high-level event on a newly defined form of terrorism. It's a mouthful. terrorist attacks on the basis of xenophobia, racism, and other forms of intolerance, or in the name of religion or belief. In short, XRIRB. Right. This is not new. We've had violent extremism for a long time. However, it is newly acknowledged and defined in the UN. It is also the first form of terrorism that is not Islamic that has been defined at the UN. A good example of this is the attack in New Zealand, the Christchurch attack. This is XRIRB, an attack based on anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim sentiments. Member states have identified this form of terrorism as the fastest growing and the biggest threat within their borders. So what we got to hear in this event was what it looks like in their community and the challenge. Most of these attacks are happening one-offs, lone actors. These are not terrorist organizations with a hierarchy that you can target. This is somebody going online, spreading hate speech, writing a manifesto, and then shooting up a mosque or a school. How do you, as a government, as a community, stop that without infringing on democratic human rights like freedom of speech? So it's a challenge, and it's a new challenge, and it's one that all the member states in UNOCT is leading to try to design a strategy to stop this while also protecting the core human rights for people. So what's next for me? I loved my time at UNOCT. This was actually my boss's boss summed it up very nicely for me in a quote, that violations of human rights perpetrated in a counterterrorism context can exacerbate the conditions conducive to the spread of terrorism in the first place. Terrorism and violent extremism is a problem in this world that is going to continue to prohibit peace. We cannot have women's empowerment, youth empowerment, if terrorists are targeting those communities. So moving forward, I am very interested in solving these large transnational, international threats that's preventing people from thriving in their communities, from finding that peaceful life for themselves, but doing it in a way that is not violating human rights, that is building an inclusive society where every voice is heard, and where terrorists and violent extremists don't have a foothold because the community is so peaceful and their bonds are so strong. Yeah, I look forward to talking to you more in breakout rooms. Thank you.
This one, no.
Yeah.
Let's sit down, everyone, please. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you have had a good time in the first session. Excellent. It was wonderful to hear from our fellows and their diverse experiences, and that was, yeah, amazing. Now, I'm originally from Switzerland. I'm always a bit obsessed with time, and we are running quite behind time. And I'm trying to be my Aussie self and not worry, and so so we meant to have lunch at 1. I think we will probably have to be a bit later, but we will try to make this session slightly shorter than originally planned so that you don't have to starve over the next little while. So we'll do that. Now, it is my absolutely huge pleasure and privilege to introduce my colleague, Associate Professor Marion Hansen, colleague and good friend as well. We have been working together for 24 years. We were first co-directors of the Rotary Centre when we got the bid in 1999. So for the first few years, Marion and I established the centre, the program, we will run it. And then afterwards, Marion was sole director for several more years, I think about 7 altogether, 10 together. So she is really the key person who sort of set our center up and ran with it and made it what it is today. And we're exceptionally grateful for Marion for all the work she's done. She's been to Evanston numerous times, worked with countless generations of fellows. So she's an absolutely wonderful supporter of Rotary and also of peace. Marion is an amazing teacher, amazing researcher, and also an amazing peace activist. Her big passion lies with arms control, especially with nuclear arms control and with human rights. So I'm going to be very quick, but I just want to say one thing. This is Marion's magnum opus, an absolutely wonderful book that just came out with Oxford University Press called Challenging Nuclearism, a Humanitarian Approach to Reshape the Global Nuclear Order. So please, let's welcome Marion Hansen.
Thank you, Roland, and good afternoon, everybody. I see that it has just gone afternoon. I'm delighted to see you all. It's great to see so many faces in the crowd that I already know. A big welcome, a big thank you to all our Rotarians, our supporters, our Peace Fellows, my colleagues and friends. I was really thrilled when one of my master's students asked me to give this address today, and I'm very humbled to be able to speak to you. I commend the Rotary Peace Centre, its director, Professor Roland Bleicher, and Deputy Director, Dr. Sebastian Kempf, and the fellows themselves who've been instrumental in putting this event together. As you know, our theme for the day is fostering peace, leave one behind. As soon as I heard this, I was struck by how well it resonated with all that Rotary does. I have to admit that until the late 1990s, I knew very little about Rotary. I knew something of what Rotarians did, but I was completely unprepared for the amazing range of magnificent work that Rotary does at the local level, on the ground, and at the widest level in the international sphere. So it was a welcome surprise for me. And I remember deciding that from my perspective, Rotarians were radicals. And I mean that as a compliment in the best way possible, because a radical goes to the root cause of things. A radical works to resolve problems based on essential principles and foundations. They commit themselves to addressing the root causes of conflict, poverty, inequality. So that I think, please do take it as a compliment. Rotarians are not usually found in the parliaments and the legislatures of the world. They're not seeking fame and fortune. Instead, they seek to make the world better for all of us and for future generations. I was honored to be the director of our centre for many years when we selected our first Peace Fellows. And as I say, I recognize many of you wonderful Rotarians here in the audience. I want to say again, thank you for your work, not just your work in improving literacy, supplying water and sanitation to developing communities, seeking an end to polio, improving maternal and child health, or the myriad other activities you undertake, but most especially for your commitment to the cause of peace and justice in our world. From my first visit to RI headquarters in Evanston, I realized how amazing this organization truly was. I worked with several in the top echelons of Rotary, and I came to understand how much they cared for these values. They clearly felt that we had to go to the roots of the problem if we wanted to seek a more peaceful and just society. And by focusing on education, by supporting Peace Fellows to undertake master's degrees, they were committing to a long-term program of enriching humankind. So over the now 2 decades of my participation in the Rotary Peace Centre, here at RI conventions, at district conferences, and in conversations with many Rotarians, I've come to realize just how powerful this stateless, weaponless, powerless organization of yours, Rotary, really is, right? You are powerful, and yet you don't have the attributes of a big state with a military and law, legal and armed forces behind it. So the fact that your dedication to so many worthwhile projects is truly remarkable. I wanted to say also a few words about yet another Rotary activity, which is relatively new, but which is gathering support at the national and international levels. And that is the rally to support the United Nations Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. My own area of research is the control of weapons and how international law and international organizations help to bring this about. So I'm very pleased to be working with Rotary on this relatively new initiative. Now, the treaty is the result of numerous studies which show the horrific effects of using even a limited number of nuclear weapons. For example, in a conflict which used just 1% of the existing stocks of nuclear weapons, not only would we see around 25 million people killed instantly in the most inhumane and brutal way, we would also see a catastrophic alteration of our climate, a nuclear winter where crops would fail and up to 2 billion people would starve. The threat presented by nuclear weapons is dire, with nuclear armed states maintaining enough firepower to destroy the world many times over. So the problem is this: we still have around 12,500 of these weapons held by 9 states. Russia and the United States account for about 90% of that total. Now, all 9 of the nuclear weapon states have promised to eliminate their arsenals, their nuclear arsenals, but they are dragging their feet. And they are even threatening to use these weapons, as we've heard from Putin over the last year and a bit. In reality, all of the nuclear weapons states leaders are threatening to use their weapons, although we've heard this most loudly from President Putin. Now, as a result, plenty of leaders, faith-based groups, non-governmental organizations, the Red Cross, and now Rotary are working to persuade these states to give up these most destructive of all weapons of mass destruction. And I stress, the call is not for unilateral disarmament, but rather for a phased, mutual, and fully verified program of disarmament. And there are plenty of models out there for this. Many analysts have studied the utility of nuclear weapons and concluded that they have no utility on the battlefield at all. Moreover, we've come dangerously close to these weapons being used by accident or misperception, and our luck will not hold forever. Nobody's saying that we can uninvent nuclear weapons, but just like other inhumane weapons, chemical, biological, landmines, etc., we can put in place strong laws and norms to stigmatize and delegitimize them. For now, the 9 nuclear weapon states won't join up. We know that. But over time, what treaties do, the treaties that we put in place against other weapons, serve to strengthen a global norm until eventually their possession and their use becomes unthinkable, we hope. It may surprise you to know that several conservative leaders have been arguing for the complete elimination of nuclear weapons. And notable among these are Ronald Reagan, Colin Powell, even Henry Kissinger, who's considered a bit of a hawk in the United States. But because of the various studies that have been done, they all believe that the world would be better off without nuclear weapons. And the conventional arsenals that states possess are plenty deadly enough to prevent or to respond to any attacks. And as one local Rotarian, Murray Clem, has put it, Rotary International and its members throughout the world could not deliver on its areas of humanitarian service without its commitment to peace and demilitarization. Deployment of nuclear weapons, now illegal under the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, would be lethal for humanity and nature and detrimental to the sustainability of the entire planet. In other words, we must secure the right not to be incinerated in a nuclear attack before thinking that we can carry on with the usual activities that we undertake. So for these Rotarians, as for so many others around the world, this is not a political or a partisan issue. It is seen as a humanitarian imperative. The ANZUS Treaty, which connects us to the United States, can remain as long as we cease claiming protection under any US nuclear weapons. By the way, the ANZUS Treaty says nothing at all about the US using nuclear weapons to protect Australia. So what has Rotary done? Okay, what has Rotary done? Rotary International has developed the Rotary Action Group for Peace with a subgroup dedicated to education about the dangers of nuclear weapons. As this group observes, human beings have prohibited the use, development, production, and possession of biological and chemical weapons by treaties and protocols. Why do we hesitate to prohibit nuclear weapons, which are far more destructive than these weapons? And many senior leaders within Rotary are very supportive of this new initiative. Ian Reisley, Holger Nauk of Germany, past RI President Shekhar Mehta of India, Jennifer Jones of Canada, and indeed Gordon McAnally of Scotland are all very much in favour of Rotary engaging with this issue much more. And as such, Rotarians from around the world, from numerous clubs, have put a proposal to the RI board to endorse the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. This has been put through to the Council on Resolutions. So in conclusion, let me just note a few issues here. and then I'm going to leave the last word to a prominent Rotarian. The Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, as of today, has 98 states, 68 of which have also ratified. Clearly, the 9 nuclear weapon states have rejected it, and the US says to its allies, don't sign it. However, several US allies have signed. If we look at the Philippines, if we look at New Zealand, indeed, some NATO states are also considering signing. And various studies conducted by strategic specialists and international lawyers have shown that it is possible to sign this treaty and continue as a member of NATO or ANZUS, as long as a state renounces nuclear weapons and works with allies only on a conventional weapons basis. I'm going to click on this link. And just wondering how I can do that. Right. Okay. This is prominent Rotarian Ira Helfand. He's a physician and is part of the social responsibility, Physicians for Social Responsibility group. He's very active within Rotary, and he has helped to author a recent report which looks at the famine that would result even if 1% of global stocks of nuclear weapons were used. So I will see if we can get any ideas. Tech? Can't do it.
The web
It's
message
just
is
the
already
web-
set up.
yeah, it's just a YouTube.
I mean, what we can try is escape from the presentation. It's not a link. That's not a link.
Not to worry,
Yeah, okay.
I will proceed without.
Go back.
Yep. We can't access that link. In any case, it was only going for about 15 or 20 seconds. But if you search the web yourself, you will be able to access many of the talks that Ira Helfand has put together. And he speaks as a scientist, as well as a very committed and active Rotarian. So in conclusion, I want to encourage you to consider supporting this Rotary initiative. And I'll be happy to speak about it or to take questions from anyone in the Q&A session. Once again, let me express my admiration for the Rotary community, all the work that you have done to support our Peace Centre and to support our wonderful Peace Fellows. Thank you. Right, I believe that we have some time for questions. How are we doing? Oh yeah, we've got perhaps 10 minutes or so. All right. Please do feel free to
who are the 9 nations? I can't think of 9.
Yes, sure. Well, out of 194 states in the United Nations, the 9 nuclear weapon states are, and this is roughly in order of when they acquired them, the US, Russia, Britain, France, China, Israel, India, Pakistan, and North Korea. So a bit of a mixed bag of reprobates there. Other questions?
In relation to
those 9 states, I think we've listened. In relation to those 9 states, what's the proportion between them in terms of who's got the most?
Right, sure. Well, the US and Russia have got roughly 5,500 to 6,000 nuclear weapons each. Britain has about 250, China about 350, Pakistan about 150, India slightly less than that, Israel around 90, and North Korea around 30 at the moment. But what we have to remember is that the bombs that have been retained and are in fact being modernized by these 9 states have a heightened level of destructiveness. Right? Some of them are 200 times more powerful than the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima. And of course, this goes against international humanitarian law, because nuclear weapons are targeted at cities. They're targeted at civilians, at our children, at our families. And this is why the focus has shifted really towards the inhumane effects of even, a very small nuclear war. And this is why now so many people within Rotary are interested in working together to promote the new treaty, which was organized in the United Nations in 2017.
Regarding the testing, is there a lot of testing still going on, and what impacts do we know of on the environment? And has testing increased recently, or is it plateaued?
Yep, thank you. Most of the nuclear weapon states have stopped testing their nuclear weapons. The only state to have tested nuclear weapons in this century has been North Korea, and they've conducted 4 or 5 nuclear weapons tests. The last was a few years ago, and we're hoping that they will not proceed any further. In terms of the nuclear weapon tests, we've had more than 2,000 of them since 1945. And the majority of those have been conducted by the US, Russia, Britain, and France. And they have impacted Indigenous communities within Australia and in the South Pacific and in places like Kazakhstan to a huge extent. The effects of those nuclear tests are still very evident. The rates of cancer, the rates of deformities, in some cases, parts of South Pacific Islands are no longer habitable. And there's one particular area in the Marshall Islands, I believe, where there's a massive concrete dome which houses the nuclear waste, and that is slowly eroding. Right? And we simply don't know what to do with that waste. I should add that the people of the South Pacific pushed together the South Pacific Nuclear Free Zone, and Australia, New Zealand are members of that treaty. And it wasn't just to ban nuclear weapons, it was to ban any further testing, to ban the visits of nuclear submarines, to ban the use of nuclear power because of the risks and dangers inherent in nuclear power. So, and this applies also to our ASEAN neighbours. In fact, just about every one of Australia's near neighbours, right, in Southeast Asia and the South Pacific have signed the treaty already. The current government promised in 2018, when it was in opposition, that it was going to sign, and Albanese has recommitted himself to signing the treaty. But of course, it will take some time, take a little bit of pushing and gentle reminding from people like yourselves for him to come on board with the treaty, because the more states you get on board with the treaty, the stronger the moral pressure is. It won't happen overnight. We know that. Okay? Sure.
As a complete novice in this field of negotiation about nuclear destruction, can you give me a concrete example where a non-political organization like Rotary could even have a small influence on the major nuclear weapon states?
Well, civil society groups in countries like the US, Russia, etc., and Australia, we claim to be under the nuclear umbrella, have been putting pressure on their governments to come on board with the treaty. And I'll just repeat that all of the 9 nuclear weapon states, including the US and Russia, have promised and are legally bound to eliminate their nuclear weapons. We can't force them to do that. Rotary cannot go to the US government and say, you must sign this treaty. But governments do respond to public pressure. And indeed, it's the pressure brought by organizations like the Red Cross, the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, the Catholic Church, the Anglican Church, trade unions, youth groups, environmental groups that helped to bring about the treaty in the first place. And they will continue to try to shape their government's attitudes.
Thank you, Marion. That was extremely interesting, and everything else we've heard today already. But with these treaties, what I can't get my head around is how do we provide a legal framework where the rights of people and nature can be enshrined in international law so they can be defended in a court of law? A treaty is a treaty, and there are really many obligations attached to it from my point of view.
Well, under international humanitarian law, in principle, the rights of civilians not to be killed in combat, the right of people safe and unpolluted environment, not destroyed by a nuclear weapon, these things already exist in international law. The treaty, the TPNW, goes much further, and it actually calls for remediation of the environments which have been destroyed and for reparations to be made for the communities who have been affected. But as with all international law, it's very, very hard to compel a state to conform with it. States are independent sovereign entities. But having said that, we've seen many examples of where we get a treaty in place, and over time, the behavior of states, including the states that refuse to sign a treaty, falls into line. So the US hasn't signed the Landmines Convention, but it has gradually stopped using landmines and selling them and manufacturing them. Again, it's a long-term process. Yep.
I'm really sorry. This is the Swiss in me who is obsessed with the time. But we have lunch planned. So huge thanks to Mel. Like, no one knows more about nuclear weapons, arms control, and questions of ethics and human rights than Marion does. She's absolutely phenomenal, and we're really grateful, Marion. Thank you. Now, a few things to explain. So lunch will be up at the college. So you can go either up here, or probably easier is up here, I presume. We have an hour, right? Till 2. So at 2 o'clock, you are not coming back here, but there will be, I'm just trying to make sure I get this right, breakout rooms. You all have different colors on your name tag. So please follow the signs that lead you to the color of the particular name tag. Did I get that right? Emily, everyone else? Yeah. So that's saying at 2 o'clock, follow this, the color of your thing and you will be in the breakaway room. Enjoy lunch.
Like, are we ready? Should we start? Okay, let's start the convention.
All right, everybody. We hope that you're back in the room. Anybody out in the lobby, please come back in.
Everybody's outside. ¿Dónde está? Where are our animators?
Few more seconds to trickle on in.
Because of a problem that we've got. So if you don't hear it, maybe just move on to the next.
It's the end.
Yeah. That's all right. It's a one shot. So it's actually the whole end. So you should be all right.
Okay.
But just don't be surprised if the video doesn't play. That's all I'm saying. Sort of move on. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So then all of you just standing there?
Going to? No. Like, shall we? Okay. And then when she turns, no. I'm not. Okay. Okay.
Very theatrical. Oh, dramatic.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So Anna and Krista, how are your guys' breakout rooms?
My breakout room was, or at the beginning, we asked them to share with us what was their last meal. And there was a guy that his last meal was popcorn. Yeah, I was in the breakout room online, and yeah, we had people from the Americas, from Oceania. Yeah, that was very, very interesting,
Yeah, today's been so nice getting to see people from, Rotary and UQ and Allos. And I think I love about Rotary pins and images with their
know.
names. It's so easy to remember everyone's name when you.
Yeah, they are so fun, almost like the ones that Krista has.
Yeah,
What is that?
what's your pin, Krista?
Oh, this one I got, actually, I don't know if you guys heard, but I'm actually a partner with UQ's Reconciliation Action Plan. And give it a second. So I don't know if you guys know a little about reconciliation, but according to the University of Queensland, reconciliation is, let me get back. It includes 5 dimensions: race relations, equity and equality, institutional integrity, unity, historical acceptance, and everyone, the private sector, civil organizations, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, everybody must incorporate these 5 dimensions in order to have reconciliation.
No, Krista, you are wrong. That is not what reconciliation is. Let me teach you. Reconciliation is about finding one common narrative between different sides. So according to my very own definition on what it is reconciliation, is when you have 2 different parts and they have a consensus about one story and it involves a truth-telling process.
No. If I was really going to tell you what I think reconciliation is personally, I think it's something you have to have every day in your life. You got to incorporate it. You got to speak the truth. You got to accept, you got to integrate it.
No. I mean, I was in the Indigenous politics class last semester with Dr. Josephine Bourne, and it's time. We're not mentioning time at all. Reconciliation is all about the fluidity of time. It's the past, the present, and the future all at once. If you can't get over the past, sure. Okay. I'm going to suggest something. What if we use our 3 definitions on reconciliation and we start to play with what Emily said about going through the time, with the past, the present, and the future. And since we are the grandmas of the Rotary Peace Fellows, why don't we go back to the past? Don't you miss the past when we started our master online? Don't you miss those glorious days? Yeah, who could forget the past? What a great time. Yeah. It was so amazing being taking classes at 3 a.m. in the morning. Who can forget about that? So we are just 3 representatives of the 19 cohort, but we were more people. Everything. We were taking our classes online in our homes. We were, some of us were in Australia, others were in Colombia, others were in the United States, others were in Costa Rica, in Rwanda, in Thailand, in Kenya, and in the US Virgin Islands. And we were struggling a lot, you know, that's why people know us as the COVID cohort, not only because it's COVID-19 and we are the 19 cohort, it's because we are known for being very resilient, you know? So think that we tend to say very often, how to say, we were very strong, a very united cohort because we were struggling together. So instead of sharing time in the campus and going to the library together, what we used to do was share beer, because beer strengthens bonds at different times. So these were us in a common day of study in our first semester, studying our Master in Peace studies. And that was the way how we strengthened our bonds with Jasmine from Argentina, Kay from Thailand, Carlos from Costa Rica, Krista in the US Virgin Islands, M in the US, and myself drinking a beer in Bogota, Colombia.
But Anna, you have to remember how hard it was, because we did bond virtually during the pandemic, but then it fractured us because Jasmine was here in Australia, so she finished before we even got here. And some people, the 3 of us, we decided to defer our studies a year and wait for the borders to open to come here. And the rest kind of did a hybrid thing, some online and some came when we decided to all finally show up when the borders were open in July. And then, you know, that brought on a whole other thing, because we arrived and there was class 20 with us too. And if you remember, we had to find housing and we had to get to know everyone in person for the first time and do all these events and get used to school and a new country. And right when everything was coming together, I think we had our applied field experience that we had to run off to, if I remember.
Well, no, there was something before then. So yeah, you know, we're the COVID-19 class 19. We know how to make lemonade out of lemons. And one of the great things about the Rotary Peace Fellowship, there's all of these different peace centers around the world, and each of them get to take a class trip to a site of significance for peace studies. So there's groups in Europe that go to the International Criminal Court at The Hague. There's people who go to the Nobel laureates awarding area in Europe. And here in Australia, we usually get to take a class trip to Canberra to learn more about Australian government and history. But unfortunately, with the timing of how things worked out, we didn't get to go. But as lemonade drinkers ourselves, we looked into things we were interested in and areas in Australia where peace is being done, it's being made, it's being built. And for that, you know, we were in the Indigenous politics class, you were joining the Reconciliation Action Plan Committee. We had this big interest in understanding what an acknowledgement of country was, who traditional owners are, and how Australia is approaching this thing that we seem to not be able to agree on, reconciliation. But to do that, we decided that rather than going to Canberra to self-organize and to learn more about reconciliation, and we headed up to Darwin in Northern Territory. And we did that because we felt like it was an area of Australia that's taking a really dynamic approach to reconciliation. And it's also where our Rotary contacts led us. So a big thank you to people who connected us with the Rotary Club of Darwin Sunrise. That includes John Lawrence, who's here today, and Leslie Smith, who sends her love, two Rotarians that are always supporting the UQ Rotary Peace Fellowship. That includes the Rotarians up in Darwin who hosted us and showed us a great time. We've got James Smith and Allison Hooper of the Sunrise Rotary Club, as well as affiliated with Flinders University. And then we also did that whole like apply for a grant type thing. The University of Queensland Student Enrichment Grant Program allowed us to do this. And, you know, I feel like it was a team effort to get there, but I don't know, Anna and Krista, you guys did a lot of the grant application. Maybe you should talk to that.
Yeah, I mean, since we are doing a master and it's expected that you do research and academic research, and because we love to travel, we had the chance to meet both of our passions. So we were thinking not only the three of us, but also with Kay and Florian, what if we design our own trip, you know, like our own research trip? So before we applied to this enrichment grant, what we did was that we create like a proposal research to go to Darwin, to have the chance to meet the Rotarians there, because they seem to be very popular, because in the north of Australia, the Rotarians are doing something to promote reconciliation between the First Nation people and the people in that territory. So the puzzle that we identify and the one that we use for application for the enrichment grant that we won on December was that the denial of the First Nations traditions and knowledge, as well as the extractivist practices that come from colonization, marginalize the First Nation people from economic and social life of Australia, putting strategic ecosystems at risk of disappearing. So with that puzzle, we also designed, we identified 3 reasons why we did want to do this research trip. The first one was because we wanted to understand how the First Nation people in Larrakia country, which is popularly known as Darwin, contributes to reconciliation through the preservation of history and the conservation of sacred territories. Also, because we wanted to connect the theory that we were learning in our master with the practice here in Australia, because none of us is from Australia, and we wanted to understand reconciliation in practice, and also because we wanted to strengthen our abilities to put peace studies and conflict transformation in practice. So our research question was, how the recognition of the First Nation people knowledge and traditions contribute to reconciliation and truth-telling processes in Darwin. So with that question and a lot of coffee, as you can see in the picture, we started this trip.
Yeah, I remember because we were actually on our AFBs when we got the news that we received the enrichment grant funding to go to Darwin. And I'm excited to share with you guys all about our trip to Darwin. But before we do that, I think we should probably talk a little about our AFBs since class 20 did that. So I'm going to go first. Hi, I'm Krista Kirschenheider. I'm graduating this semester. I'm class 19. I'm originally from the United States. I consider the Micronesia region to be my home. I grew up on the island of Saipan in the Northern Mariana Islands. And I actually was one of the first people they told me from Micronesia to do this Peace Fellowship. I'd been residing in Saipan at the time, and we had a big natural disaster that I was involved in. I think the sustained winds were 215 kph. So it's a pretty big storm, a lot of houses taken out and lost a lot. And I was involved in the recovery, and I received very little national and international attention. And that's when it occurred to me that, you know, in the Pacific, in my home where I'm from, we are the frontline people that deal with these issues with climate change, with big natural disasters because of it, environmental issues. And a lot of people don't pay much attention or see it or know it, even though this is part of our lives. So I decided to apply for this fellowship and redirect my career. I'm a lawyer. I've been practicing law for 12 years throughout the state of Nevada, throughout Saipan, Micronesia, and most recently in the Caribbean, helping low-income people. And I decided if with this fellowship, I would try to use my legal knowledge, experience, and personal life experiences in the Pacific to address some of these climate change issues. So for my AFE, I reached out actually to Kiribati. And I said, hey, can I come out there and do some of these climate change issues? And when I reached out, they said, why don't you instead come to Rambi? And I said, okay. I did not know about Rambi. Rambi, if you can kind of see on the map, and if you talk to me in one of the breakout rooms, is a very small island in Fiji. It's actually not open to tourists. It's got about 5,000 people. And it was purchased by the British Empire for the Banabin people, which were evacuated in 1945 from their home in Banaba, which is now located in Kiribati, to this island Rambi. They bought it with their phosphate mining that the British was using. They evacuated the people to this island so they could continue mining and taking all the phosphate out of Banaba. So the people I worked with, the Banabins, the Banabin Rambi Council of Leaders and the Banabin Women Organization are ethnic minorities in Fiji. They're Fijian citizens. They can also have Kiribati citizenship, but they speak entirely different language. In fact, different culture. They said, they oftentimes told me they didn't know Fiji culture, even though they are Fijian as well, just not indigenous Fijian. So this little boy in the left there, that's my son. He turned 13 while we were out there. And that little spot that I took that picture is where we took the final boat to get to the island. It was a 24-hour trip, 2 plane rides, 2 ships, 2 buses, 2 car rides. And we got to the island and no electricity, no hot water, no refrigeration. What else? No stores. Oh, we did have stores. I'm sorry. No restaurants, no hotels. Stayed in the guest house. So it's a little different. But it was beautiful and wonderful and exciting and a very great experience. I just kind of put a couple pictures up here to kind of show you what my life was like. That is the store. That's kind of what you could buy. And there's a picture of the boat we took, and the picture in the middle, one of the things we did while we were out there was we set up pipes from one of the natural springs in one of the remote fishing villages to bring water to the community. And that was the house that I stayed in, still dirt floors and wood burning stove, and they cooked us dinner while we were out there. Funny story with the water issues. We had to boil water. And my son said to me, he said one day he got frustrated because with runoff and the rain, sometimes you couldn't drink the water even when you boiled. And he said, it shouldn't be so hard for me to drink water. And I said, well, yeah, good lesson learned. I agree. So like I mentioned, the Banabins were brought by the British Empire in 1945 to this island. This picture, the colored picture here, is the annual 77th anniversary. These women were what they call pioneers. They were brought as children. They're some of the last remaining survivors of that time as environmental refugees, very much into keeping their culture traditions alive. Like I said, no, they're not open to tourism, so not a lot of industry. As you saw me in the breakout room, I did talk about the one industry, the one factory they have, the coconut oil. And just a funny fact that Rambi happens to be right in the middle of the international date line. So you walk on this little road where the horse was earlier and you cross the international date line. So what did I do? Maybe you guys want to hear about that. So what I did is I helped them basically with the government in that they have rights to two countries, Fiji and Kiribati, and they're somewhat self-autonomous with their laws, but the council was actually disbanded in 2013 due to fraud. And so they really wanted to bring back their own elected leaders. And the problem was too, they don't want to bring in the Fiji and the Kiribati government so much. So they needed somebody to kind of overlook their laws and figure out how to basically restructure their government and help them. So I began with reading through the Kiribati Constitution, Fiji laws, things like that. They have the Bannerman Settlement Act and the Land Act, meeting with the judges, court, government, and kind of wrote up something for a policy brief. I focused on immediate ways, long-term, and something in between. So one of the things we did that I was very proud of is I stressed to them why they need an administrator immediately, or they could lose rights to their island in Banaba. So that was, he was appointed just recently. And then we also talked about ways to bring back the local elections by next January, and ways they could restructure some of their laws and maybe even out some of the powers among the core and the executive branch had to be further strengthened. Another thing I did was I trained the local police there in some of the laws, so they knew there's a tension. They have the national Fiji police, but they also have their local police, and they were unfamiliar with how to like incorporate their own domestic laws and what their rights are. So we went over that with them. And I also got involved in a couple interesting cases. A big thing that came up, they were dealing with a case where they're returning a ancient skull from University of Melbourne. There's some, yeah, a skull.
I did do part of my AFE in Fiji. That's right. Thank you. Okay. Technical difficulties, am I right? There's supposed to be a first slide in here that I don't think made it into the final presentation. And that is a map of where I'm from and a bunch of pictures of me. And a bit of a spoiler that we kind of already went through some of the slides. But my name's Emily Andre, and I am from a place in the United States called Antioch, Illinois. And that is the land of the Potawatomi people, who I'd like to extend an acknowledgement and a respect for. And it's a place that's right in the middle of the country. It's sort of smack dab in the middle of what we call the Midwest. It's not the East Coast, it's not LA, it's not New York, but it is a place that I call home. And while many might call it flyover country, I think of it as a place that gets cold in the wintertime and hot in the summertime. And while people can get down on it because it's not anything too fabulous, I've always been interested in making the places and spaces that I'm in better. You can see this picture of me here being the in a 4th of July parade. And you can also see a picture of me as a high school student who was involved in Interact, the Rotary Interact Club. I founded a club, and I've been kind of involved with Rotary in that way ever since. You can also see a picture of me in the local newspaper. I was mayor for the day. I was the mayor of Antioch, Illinois for a whole day. Thank you. And so I've always been very interested in making the place that I'm from better. And so I went away to school and I studied international studies because I wanted to see how other communities build themselves up and develop themselves. And when I graduated from university, I served abroad as a Peace Corps volunteer. And that experience really pushed me towards wanting to work in international development. And I thought that after that experience, that's probably where I would land in my career. And I actually applied to the Rotary Peace Fellowship as someone really passionate about international development and food security and food systems and making them stronger and inclusive. And I'm still very interested in that. But during my fellowship, as you heard earlier, we started online. And if you can imagine, between 2019, when myself and Krista found out we were going to be Peace Fellows, to today, 2023, a lot in the world has changed. And all right. Okay, a lot in the world has changed. And a lot of pretty horrible things happened in the place that I'm from that you would have seen on the last slide. Is a beautiful, wonderful place. Like I said, I'm from Antioch, and in the virtual days, while we were studying virtually online, there was a shooter from my hometown. Kyle Rittenhouse is an Antioch teenager, 17, who takes a gun across the border into Kenosha, Wisconsin, and shoots and kills 2 people at a protest for racial equality. He went to the same high school that I did. We took a year off, and we waited for the borders to open. We got to come to Australia in early July of 2022, and the 4th of July parade right before I left. So you might have seen in the last slide where I was in that 4th of July parade with the Rotary float. One town over in Highland Park, there was a shooting that killed 6 people. Then when I got here, it's been wonderful and great and hard and messy. And while I was in the middle of writing one of my very first papers here as an in-person student in August of 2022, there was a shooting a town over in Gurnee, Illinois, at a local amusement park, a Six Flags Great America. And I have a 13-year-old brother who has a season pass to this same amusement park and was there when there was an active shooter. So my 13-year-old brother was waiting in line for a roller coaster and learned to duck and hide away from someone who had a gun. So lots of people in the US work on gun policy. It's a big issue. As you can see from this little doodle here, mass shootings are as American as apple pie. But for me, what's interesting is that why is it that these people take up guns? Where do they come from? We all think that they come from places that are so different from where we're from. But for me, this is where I'm from. These 3 places. I went to the same school as one of these people. The communities that they came from is the same community that I came from. So while many things drive mass shootings, and while some are politically motivated, some are interpersonal, gang, one-on-one person related, oftentimes many mass shootings involve conspiracy theories and extreme beliefs, and people who find places and spaces on the internet that reinforce harmful ideas. Political extremism often finds a home under the same tent as conspiracy theories. And my research has changed quite a bit from when I first applied to the fellowship. So now I have been looking at the role that conspiracy theories and misinformation and disinformation play in political polarization, in domestic terrorism, and in general societal conflict. So how do you have an AFE about that, right? Well, as you can see here on this slide, half of it is pretty easily related. I took a couple online webinars with a group called All Together Now about identifying far-right extremism and responding to far-right extremism. But the other half of my AFE, which is what brought me to Fiji, is something that I find to be the solution to political extremism, and that's dialogue and mediation. The other half of my field experience is an opportunity that I got to have through the Peace and Conflict Studies Institute of Australia, which is known as PAXIA. And one of the directors and members are here today, Erica Rose Jeffries and Casey Crockett. Welcome. But through interning with that group, with the Peace and Conflict Studies Institute, I participated in the Oceania Peacebuilding Institute in Suva, Fiji for 3 weeks, where I got to learn from community builders and peacemakers in Fiji, in Solomon Islands, and in Kiribati. These are people who are focused on connecting climate change with peace building, who work every day in their communities in a rapidly changing setting. And while the work that I did here in these photos is a bit more about climate change and peace building and that connection, rather than political extremism, I draw the connection because both of these areas have elements of values-based conflict. So it was a really great learning experience for me. One of the proudest moments that I had during my AFE, and if you stopped by my table during the breakout sessions, you would have seen that this piece of material was there, and it was a facilitator's guide on integrated mediation, dialogue, and multi-party processes. So while in this context, it was related to change and climate change impacted communities, these are great transferable skills to being able to talk with people who have extreme beliefs. So in pursuing the AFE that I did, and in taking the classes that I have here as a Peace Fellow, one of the things that has been just a huge highlight of my time here is learning more about mediation. And one of the reasons that I put University of Queensland as my top choice as a Rotary Peace Centre is because of the CRMD 7000 class, mediation. The professor who teaches that was here earlier this morning, Serge Lloyd, but he's no longer here. And I had a wonderful time where I really figured out my passion. My research interests and my personal internal flame are lit by preventing political extremism and helping bring conspiracy theories and people with extreme beliefs back into reality and everyday society. But professionally, it's all about mediation. It's about being able to talk with one another and in looking to not leave anyone behind. Conspiracy theorists are people too, and we have to be able to talk with them and bring them back down. So in looking towards what's next, I'd love to be able to combine a way to have facilitation and mediation engage with people with extreme views. So if anybody happens to be hiring for a job that combines those two things, I graduate in about 60 days from now, and I have working rights. So thank you very much. But Anna, tell us about your AFE.
In Australia, they have this amazing tradition of acknowledging the traditional owners of the land. Well, yes, this is not the updated version of the presentation. I'm sorry, but this is not the updated version. Okay, this is going to take some time, but it's worth it. Sorry. Okay, this is not happening. Please, nobody look my password, but this is going to be very important. Yeah, cybersecurity, high level of cybersecurity. Well, the story worth it, I swear. Worth it to wait for this. Yeah, don't look at the photos. I'm kidding. Well, this is my part. And now you are going to know why it's worth it. How to put this in presentation mode? Yeah. I want to acknowledge. I want to dedicate this presentation to my grandfather. He passed away when I was doing my applied field experience in Sydney. And everything that I know about peace economies is thanks to this guy. I swear that I was not going to cry. So I have been working with peace and indigenous communities in my country. And the reason why I started to work with them is because the roots of the Colombian armed conflict are related with rural issues. And my family comes from the rural Colombia. And I started to see a lot of my personal story on the violent conflict that we have in Colombia. So I studied business administration, and I am also a sociologist. And I always have been very curious about what makes a person in the local level get involved in a drug trafficking economy, because that's a big issue in Colombia. And I have had the privilege to be working in 22 of the 32 states that we have in our country, and the drug production is a problem. But I always have been very curious about why this. It's not only about the money, because it's also about the community consequences that this kind of economies has in the grassroots level. So during the last 8 years of my life, I have been dedicated in trying to understand the structural causes of armed conflict in Colombia. And I have been involved in the implementation of our peace agreement, which has from an approach of positive peace and conflict transformation, it has 5 chapters, and I have been working in 3 of them. The first one is the comprehensive rural reform, because we believe that if we transform the inequity in the rural places in Colombia, we are going to achieve a sustainable peace. Also, the end of conflict. It was supposed to be my task to add a D, sorry for that. So when we talk about end of conflict from a perspective of conflict transformation, is not only about deleting the direct violence or the physical violence. It's also about how we include the people that used to be part of in the case of Colombia, of the guerrillas, the people who used to be revolutionary armed actors. How do they become, again, Colombian citizens? So I have been working in their reincorporation to the economy in Colombia, and also the solution of the illicit drug problem. And during this journey, 8 years ago, also, I decided to start my own NGO. The name is Tres Colibris, which in English would be 3 hummingbirds, and the name of the organization is because of my tattoo, which have my mom, my sister, and myself. So we are the original 3 hummingbirds. And we have been doing very cool projects about food sovereignty, agroecology, sustainable agriculture all over Latin America. So in Guatemala, we did a workshop about peace economies in practice, how local indigenous organizations can develop by their own marketing strategies, because normally are the big enterprise, and normally they are for gain enterprise, the ones who control the marketing strategies of the local organizations. So what we were doing in Tres Colibris was developing in the grassroots level the marketing organizations. We were doing something very similar with an organization in Bolivia. First, they came to Bogota, they traveled to Bogota. And secondly, I traveled to Cochabamba, Bolivia to work with them. And also I did something similar with another organization in Bolivia, a marketing and monitoring and evaluation strategy. And also we did some activities with an indigenous university in Oaxaca in Mexico. So the main research topics of Tres Colibris were sustainable consumption, rural women, agroecological production, solution to the illicit drug problem, and peace and sustainability, which are very, very connected with our Colombian peace agreement. So I started to realize that I have kind of the practical experience about peace building, but I didn't have like the theoretical experience and a theoretical framework. So that's why I decided to apply to the scholarship, to the Rotary Peace Fellowship. And since the last 2 years of my life, I have been studying here my master online and in person, trying to understand from the theoretical but also practical approach how we can switch from war economies, and as a war economy is an economy that is extractivism, that is not inclusive, that is violent, to peace economies with a grassroots level. So I was asking to myself how I am going to find an organization that is going to allow me to work on peace economies to do my applied field experience. I didn't, so I found 2 organizations to do my applied field experience. So at the beginning, I was literally growing food. At the beginning of my applied field experience, I was in Cooktown in the north of Queensland. And in the mornings, I was literally working in the garden, growing food to understand the interactions in the ecosystem level. And in the afternoons, I was doing research. So I was trying to understand what we can replicate from the ecosystems to the social systems to understand how we can transform conflicts. And also because in my very personal understanding of peace economies, the nature and the environments have a very important place. So that was my first part of my applied experience. So we did a cool video that you can find in Spanish and in English in the YouTube channel of Learning from Nature. And I also did a research article for Tres Colibris that you can find also in Spanish and in English, and what we can learn from ecosystem to transform conflicts. And something very cool that happened after I did my applied field experience is that I found this organization through a global network that I am part of. The name is Regeneration International, and we keep doing work and project together with Learning from Nature. So it was an opportunity to strengthen networks all over the world. And then I went from the field to the very fancy Sydney. I did my applied field experience also with my mate Tunde, and I was working with the Institute for Economics and Peace. So I was focused mainly in two lines. The first one was doing monitoring and evaluation. So they have this amazing program that they call the IEP Ambassador Program. So as I have this business administration background, I was trying to build with them a value proposal to reorganize the model of the program. We also were doing workshops about monitoring and evaluation, and because in the past I have been coordinating projects, I was sharing some of what I learned with Caritas Colombiana about the stages of project, like how we can put in practice, like in a very practical way, the achievement of positive peace. And we also did this amazing workshop with the guys from Savannah Pride that Tunde already mentioned before. And in the second part of my internship, I was doing research. So I was working very close to the Latin American office, which is in Mexico. I was doing research about terrorism in Mexico, and I found that there is an amazing connection about what is happening, like the terrorism in Mexico and in Colombia, because after we started our peace agreement, the dynamics of the drug trafficking production in Colombia have changed a lot. There are a lot of cartels from Mexico that had arrived to Colombia, and also the production of methamphetamine has increased a lot, the production and the consumption, and also the production and the consumption of cocaine has reduced a lot. So it was very interesting because it helped me to gain like a global understanding of the conflict that we face in Colombia. I also did some infographies for the Latin American office about the dynamics of terrorism and ecological risk in Latin America. I also did a couple of articles about what was going on during my applied field experience. I had the chance to do a very cool article about positive peace and the conservation of strategic ecosystems like the Amazon rainforest. And basically, that was all regarding my AP. And let's continue.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. During that time, we were also meeting virtually to talk about that reconciliation trip. We found out, 1 or 2 days before we left to go do all of those great things, that we had won this grant and that our research question had been accepted. And so when we came back from AFE, we had something to plan, and maybe we should explain what it was. We got to name our trip, and it's called the Reconciliation Research Project in Larakia, Benin, and Mungui countries. And Larakia is what most people colonially know as Darwin. And the other two are where the Kakadu National Park lies. So those are 3 separate countries in Northern Territory that we visited.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. Maybe we should talk a little about what we did out there. This is in our agenda, and it was very packed, very, very packed 5 days. Yeah, and we've kind of color coded them. Let's see, the light blue were the cultural activities. The yellow are the meetings that we had with various people, both First Nations, Torres Strait Islander, and non-Indigenous people. The green includes the presentations that we did. We did quite a few presentations while we were out there to groups. And then I think we've got some a little gray in there about some dinners and meetings, but we basically, to sum it up, we met with the Darwin groups out there, the Darwin Rotary groups, 5 clubs. We presented on Saturday. We did a lot of cultural immersion experiences to learn. And the highlight for me personally was these meetings with the professionals that we talked to. We were being hosted at Flinders Medical University there at Charles Darwin University. And it was just amazing. We learned so much about reconciliation. The center picture here is Uncle Richie Fejo. He's a professor at the Flinders Medical School, but he's also a Larakia elder, and he welcomed us to country with a traditional saltwater ceremony. So that was really moving, very meaningful, felt very welcomed. And we also visited several museums. We went to the art museums. We went to the military museum. We've got some funny pictures up there of us at Kakadu National Park. And we met with 4 different universities in Darwin personnel. We went with Menzies, Flinders, Charles Darwin University, and Bachelor. So just hearing firsthand stories, a lot of truth telling about intergenerational trauma with the stolen generation and blackbirding, and just ways we can work together as peace practitioners. But, you know, I shouldn't just talk about what we learned, Anna.
We also had the chance to be the one who teach, kind of the professor. So because we were visiting universities, you know, an academic context. So we had the chance to visit the University of Flinders, the Charles University, and also an organization that is focused on mediation in Darwin. And we also were panelists. So we played to be the experts on reconciliation. So we received a lot of questions, but at the end, rather than answer, we gave to the auditorium more questions about reconciliation, and we had great conversations about what is the meaning of reconciliation here in Australia, you know, because we had the chance to visit the Kakadu Park, which is a sacred place for Indigenous people, but we also had the chance to visit a museum that, represents the participation of Australia on the Second World War. And they were 2 different narratives on what is Australia, the white Australian narrative and the First Nation narrative. And it gave us amazing tools to understand reconciliation, because it depends on who you ask. Like if you ask a First Nation person, probably that person is not going to feel safe here in Australia, and probably that person is going to think that this is not necessarily a peaceful society. So it gave us a lot of tools to understand better what is reconciliation. What do you think, Em?
Yeah, I mean, we were learners and teachers, but we were also practitioners on that trip. I feel like there were quite a few different people working every day on reconciliation that weren't necessarily something we learned and weren't necessarily something that we taught. I mean, we got to meet with the administrator of Northern Territory at the government house, and to go to the National Critical Care and Trauma Response Center. And I think the thing that stuck with me the most from the trip is the idea of activist scholars and being able to take what you're learning into the classroom into everyday life. A lot of these concepts are so big, and I mean, reconciliation, that's a gigantic word, and we all think about it differently. But it's taking what you're learning in the classroom and bringing it back into your everyday work that really matters. And I feel like this trip, you know, not only taught us so much, and we taught and we learned about more practice and skills as practitioners, but it really made us come together. You guys are some of my closest friends, and I feel like all of the work that we put into that trip and the online,
that's why we are called the grandmas.
Yeah, we'll be friends until we're actually grandmas. But yeah, you know, we're in our final semester now. We're approaching our graduation. We have had so much fun in group dinners and trips and karaoke nights and baby showers, and we can't believe that it's almost over. Isn't that crazy?
And don't forget our matching backpacks we got from Flinders that we all use now.
Yeah. But it's very important to remember that we are not the only people that is part of the 19 cohort. There is also people that is still doing their master studies. So there is Kate, she's from Thailand, and her background is work with refugees. She has been working with refugees from Myanmar and from different parts of Asia, and she did her AFE in Uganda. She was working with the Danish Refugee Council. And there is, of course, Florian. She's from Burundi. She is pregnant and she's going to have a beautiful kid, a beautiful baby on May. So she couldn't make it here today, but they are from the heart with us here today.
And then, of course, we have to remember the three class 19 members who have actually graduated. You may have known Carlos from Costa Rica, Jasmine from Argentina, and Titus Kemboy from Kenya. And they've all returned back to their home countries since graduating, and we expect really amazing things from them. In fact, we're hopeful that we may be able to play a little video of a couple messages from some of the class 19. So we'll see if it plays. We're not sure. Let's check it out. Think so? Oh, okay. Where do we go for the other one? Oh, sorry, but they wished us all the best and they're all doing well. And if you guys are interested, come chat with us later. We'll be happy to share the videos with you. Thank you. Thank you.
Wow, that was fascinating. Thanks so much to all of you, Krista, Emily, and Anna. Thanks to all fellows, first of all. I mean, I'm not sure how you experienced it, but I found it was a fascinating day, hearing about a whole range of different experiences, both in terms of listening, but also participating. So I just want to say big thanks to all our fellows. Thank you so much. And as you know, the whole purpose of this fellowship is that to provide our fellows with the skills, the insights, but also the networks necessary. You've seen the networks up here of fellows who have graduated, so that they can have these skills and networks and use them once they're in a position of influence in society. And I'm confident that many of our fellows will be in a position of influence in 10, 15, 20 years, and then use these skills to actually make a difference when they are the ones deciding between conflict and peace, when they are the ones in situations when they can mediate and actually make a difference. So I want to say good luck to all of our fellows in your task ahead. And as you know, this is now the 21st year, so we have many fellows already out there who actually make a genuine difference in the world. So this is, to me, the essence of what this program is all about. So I want to thank, in a second instance, all of our Rotarians here for enabling this. You know, you are the ones who make this possible. Without you, we wouldn't be able to have this program. We wouldn't be able to have all these fellows here. We wouldn't be able to have the fellows who are out in the community to do this. So an absolutely massive thanks from all of here, the fellows, our UQ staff members, to your support. We really, really appreciate your support. Thanks a lot. And look, last, again, thanks to everyone who organized the event today. That's all the fellows, that's Diana, that's Emily, that's everyone behind the scene. You know, months and months have gone into preparing that. We also would like to thank our IT support for that. So we really, really big thanks for that happening. So I don't want to take your time because cocktails are waiting. So I think the next thing is John, or yeah, John, or first Michelle. Yes, I wasn't planning to wrap things up. I'm just saying the slides. I'm just saying I don't want to monopolize your time. So Michelle first.
Thanks, Roland. Yes, I know you heard from me before. You really don't need it again, but I've got a very special honor today, and so I'm glad I'm back up here. The speakers today, this afternoon, demonstrate well, all of the speakers today, just how diverse the 2 years are. And just like I was talking about before, you know, with the class 17, you're all doing different things. And I'm writing notes about your AFEs. And when I look through it, everyone's doing something different. Isadora's negotiating and doing trauma response. Nick, you know, goes from being in the Marine Corps, and the next thing he's traipsing through Mongolia and wants to do his research in the nomads of Mongolia. It was lovely. I was able to connect him with a friend of ours who had lived in Mongolia for 2 years. So who was here this morning. Rebwa, working with refugees and doing an amazing job, and continues to do an amazing job. Tundi, working on positive peace, and everything I've heard about what you're doing is absolutely amazing. And Sarah, I love your comment about wanting to solve the problem with South Korea. If only it was all that easy. But you know what? It's fantastic to see exactly the sort of work that you're doing. And then Jenny, where's Jenny? Oh, there she is. Jenny started off in politics, and there she is, a politician. And the next thing we see her traipsing through Nepal. And having been up that part of the world, not quite as far as you've been, you know, that's a fantastic, what you're actually trying to achieve is amazing in your study. And then, of course, this afternoon, time to change my piece of paper here. Krista, from being a lawyer all those years ago, and what you're doing and making a difference in smaller communities, you know, will be remembered for a long time. So taking the practical skills that you came with and then going out there and helping other people is truly remarkable. And Emily, I put these in the wrong place, so you have to excuse me. And I think this is amazing. Coming from an area where gun violence is just so prevalent, and looking at the conspiracy theories and things like that, and trying to turn it all around to work out about reconciliation. And, you know, that to me, all the different facets of the peace building is quite amazing. And certainly last but not least is Anna. And we had heard her story about how she'd been working with the Colombian to get them from going from the negative piece of, you know, with the drug trade, you know, to becoming farmers and using their land for something more productive, and taking it one step further and looking at food security as well. So I'd just like to say, I think all of you have done the most remarkable job, and I commend you all, and I know you're going to have a wonderful future. So on behalf of Rotary and the Fellows, I want to express an appreciation also and tremendous support of the University of Queensland Peace Centre staff. This year we welcome Roland Blaker as Director of the Peace Centre, and he's been part of the program since its inception in 2002, which is amazing, and served as the first director with Associate Professor Marianne Hansen, by the way, whose keynote address today was amazing. And he's taught a class, Roland's taught a class in every master's program since then. So thank you very much for everything you've done. I think applause might help. I also want to acknowledge the ongoing work and guidance provided by Graduate Centre Manager Diane McCluskey, who is now also the proud recipient of a Paul Harris Fellow Award, and so rightly deserved. Many of you don't know the work that Diana carries out behind the scenes, but she is absolutely integral for this project to work. I'm sure every student knows this intimately. I also want to acknowledge the Rotary Advisory Board, the two district representatives, David Field and myself, who today is acting HAC, and also the class representatives who are still here, and that's Emily Andre and Isadora Darrett. So thank you very much for the work you do. I would now like to ask Anna, Krista and Emily to come to the front so they can receive their pins and their certificates.
Yes.
It's been an honor to spend the day listening to such inspiring future world leaders. I'd just like to interrupt what I was about to say. I came about, I can't remember, about 15 years ago. I wasn't doing anything one Saturday and Kim was working. I thought, oh, okay, I'll go to the Peace Centre, the seminar. Well, I tell you, that day changed my life because I heard all these young people, and not so young, like amazing students telling the most incredible stories. And I was so impressed by it. I have never I missed one because they changed the date. But apart from that, and today, Kim and I for the last few years have been counsellors, host counsellors, and I'm now acting hack. So I just got to say, I love it. I'm sorry you've got me for a long time. So it's great to be part of the journey of the Peace Fellows, and even in a small way, as they inspire us to support Rotary International in its endeavour to help facilitate world peace. Thank you.
I stagger up here with a great heap of things. Now, I learned something this week. We've been having a very interesting chat with all the fellows and the management, etc. And I learned something when I was talking to class 21. And that was we were asked at the start of each of these classes to introduce ourselves. I suddenly realized I had to change how I did that. I just said, because this is the Janet Lawrence recognition, that I was the husband of that lady. And that's really as it starts, because this recognition is dedicated to her memory. She was an indomitable volunteer and advocate for Rotary Peace Fellowship Program and the University of Queensland, particularly the Peace Centre. This year's class 19 has outstanding contributors to the Rotary UQ Peace Centre, and two of the people stood out. I thought I'd break with and start a new tradition, and that I'd like to award a highly commended, and I presume those sitting on Zoom can see what we're doing, because these events don't happen unless there's a generous person like Dalla Zeppi, whose generosity has ensured that these seminars take place. That's something we often forget to say. But also, when you look at this fantastic group of people, it becomes very difficult to say, well, what should we be choosing? And I thought that the work that Carlos did is highly commended, and I therefore am equally happy to announce that this year's award of the Janet Lawrence Peace Recognition is to Krista Hiva. Krista, come forward. Now, look at this. Look at this fancy one. Krista, congratulations. Well done. But it doesn't end there, because one of the things that Janet was always a very generous contributor to the foundation, because it was part of what she believed in. Both the graduates, Carlos and particularly Krista, will now be awarded Paul Harris Fellows. Now, come on back down. At this point, I need help from my district governor, Tim Keeler, because part of that activity, if I could just expand that for a moment there, both the graduates will receive, be recognized by becoming Paul Harris Fellows. Rotarians designated a Paul Harris Fellow as a tribute to a person who has demonstrated a shared purpose for the objects of the Rotary Foundation. It acknowledges that somebody has donated $1,000 to the foundation to have that happen. Since Janet was a strong fiscal supporter of the Rotary Foundation, we, me and my boys, believe it would be her wish to utilize her Rotary Foundation credits to complement the Peace Fellow recognition with Paul Harris Fellow and now Fellows, both to Carlos and particularly Krista. Therefore, I ask our district governor to and just like steak knives, there's more here. And right. And Tim, could I ask you to hold up Carlos's? Now, I'll get in the photo. It's not about me, it's about Janet.
He is online.
Yes, he's online. Well, particularly, Carlos intends to become a Rotarian, and he will be a brand new Rotarian, walk in there, and as they put the pin on his shoulder, say, "You're already a Paul Harris Fellow." Oh, blimey. So thank you very much. Well done. Thank you, Carlos. Somewhere up there in the sky. Thank you, DG, for your help. Right. And I believe it's now time for something far more important than me talking to you. Who's in charge of the drinks? Diana, up the top. Let's go back up where we were for lunch and let's enjoy some talking with the can we call you students or no, there's 3 graduates. Yes. Okay. Once again, thank you.